my children, and welcome once again to Longbox of the Damned! A new location once more. And yet, despite being something fresh, it's full of the familiar. And how appropriate for what we're starting off this year with. DC's late answer to Marvel Zombies. Deceased. Darkseid, ruler of Apocalypse, has once again invaded Earth, and once again the cape and costume crowd have dealt with him. However, Darkseid being Darkseid, he admits under the compelling of the lasso of truth that he has no need for Earth. The invasion was all a ploy to capture Cyborg. The Machine Man is brought to Darkseid's chief torturer, Desaad, who tells him of the anti-life equation, a force that strips those who are exposed to it of free will. Darkseid already possesses half of the equation and believes that the other half exists within Cyborg's systems. To ensure that they control Victor Stone and not risk losing the equation should he die during the combining of the halves, Darkseid summons the Black Racer, the Grim Reaper of the New Gods. Feels like he should be winning more often if he's got death itself on his contacts list. They extract the blood of the Black Racer and inject it into Cyborg. But once he placed his half of the equation into Cyborg, it changed. It corrupts the equation, turning it into a virus that infects Darkseid. Desaad, realizing what they had made, sends Cyborg back to Earth, while Darkseid leaps into the core of Apocalypse and unleashes his power, utterly destroying the world. Cyborg, meanwhile, was soon seen by the citizens of Metropolis when he lands, and the anti-life equation spread. The equation turned into a techno-organic virus, infecting the minds of any who looked at a screen. Social media allowed it to spread quickly, turning any who witnessed it into violent zombies enslaved to its will. This is why I don't have a Twitter account, my children. Or maybe that's why I should get one. Superman, quickly learning of all this, rescues Lois Lane, their son John, and Robin Damian Wayne. Batman, in turn, works to try to stop it and switches all his equipment to analog backups instead of the digital. Unfortunately, his systems predict that 600 million have already been infected, and that billions will be infected in a matter of days. While Batman is able to help Alfred, both Nightwing and Tim Drake become infected and attack him, biting and clawing at the Caped Crusader. Superman takes his rescued family to the Daily Planet, hoping to use some of its older equipment to communicate with as many heroes and survivors that they can get in touch with. Meanwhile, Poison Ivy encourages Harley Quinn to go talk to the Joker with a baseball bat to finally and completely cut things off from him. Though it looks like from his face, he's been busy with cutting things already. Out on a camping trip, Hal Jordan, Oliver Queen, and Dinah Lance enjoy some time together. Until Hal looks at his phone and becomes infected. Black Canary is forced to use her sonic scream to kill him. And it seems the Green Lantern ring is okay with that, because she is quickly found as a replacement, becoming a new Green Lantern herself. Green Canary doesn't have quite the same pizzazz to it. Makes it sound more like it's moldy or something. Superman retrieves them and they get in contact with Batman, who's slowly succumbing to the anti-life equation, slowed down only by one of Mr. Freeze's refrigeration suits. He informs them that they are not zombies. Screw you, they totally are zombies, or else they wouldn't be on my show. They're the anti-living, stealing life and spreading death. The techno-organic virus can be stopped only two ways: destroy any carriers of the virus, and destroy the internet. Well, I'm out of a job. See you next year when I start spotlighting horror radio dramas. After he says farewell to his son, Batman succumbs to the virus and Alfred is forced to kill him, taking a Batplane to rendezvous with the others. After Harley defeats the Joker, she's then forced to kill the Birds of Prey, with Poison Ivy's help of course. Atlantis is soon attacked by an infected Aquaman, who in turn spreads the disease to Tempest and forces Queen Mera to flee. Superman rescues some more heroes and civilians on the way to Smallville, learning that sadly his own father has been infected. He locks him away, unable to kill him as he rescues his mother and brings her back to the Daily Planet. Things go from bad to worse when Ray Palmer becomes infected, using his microscopic powers to go inside Captain Atom and infecting him too. The nuclear might inside of him now able to get infected. While the messages go out for any heroes and civilians to head to the Daily Planet, they learn of Captain Atom's infection. Superman and Wonder Woman try to stop him, but he detonates himself with his full fury, destroying Washington, D.C., Baltimore, and Metropolis. It's only thanks to Black Canary's new Green Lantern powers that the survivors, well, survive. Over the next few days, progress is made. Every major server taken down, every mass digital broadcasting device destroyed, internet pipelines and cables severed across the globe. Themyscira is expanded and takes on refugees from the world. Damien takes on the mantle of his father and negotiates with Poison Ivy to let survivors stay in the Gotham jungle that she has set up that wards off any infected. The Fortress of Solitude becomes the new Hall of Heroes, where Lex Luthor aids in designing giant arc ships. To Cyborg and Luthor, Earth is doomed. Even with their progress, there's no way to stop the infection and too many zombies to kill. The arcs begin being constructed. But soon the heroes are attacked by the Martian Manhunter, whose vast array of powers allows him to kill many and infect the Flash. With his super speed, many survivors are turned and taken down, so Superman must end him. But the Flash was able to get a few fingers past the Man of Steel's skin, probably from vibration, and thus begin infecting him too. He says his farewells to his family before flying into space, hoping to get as far away from Earth and starved of oxygen as he can. But it's too late when Superman falls. All hope was lost at 11:48 a.m. It was a Wednesday.
Still, nice day for it.
Realizing the Arcs have no chance of escaping Earth while Superman is infected, they quickly get to work on how to stop him. Wonder Woman merging kryptonite with the Sword of Athena. The weapon of the goddess of war, craft, and mathematics is appropriate. After all, what they fight is an equation.
I know typing of the dead is a thing, but what about math problems of the dead?
As 6 million people are loaded onto the Ark, Poison Ivy elects to stay behind, refusing to abandon the Earth and, well, Harley Quinn loves her, so they stay. Superman is engaged as the Arcs take off, with Wonder Woman managing to stab him at the cost of her own life to the equation. Cyborg also must stay behind, being patient zero of the virus. Superboy fights his father as the Green Lantern Corps finally arrives, quarantining Earth and giving the unliving Superman pause. He retreats into the sun to absorb its power and turn the system cold. They may not kill the virus, but they will contain it for now. Cyborg uses the lasso of truth to communicate with the equation. It admits that it cannot be stopped, but that there is a cure to the virus inside of Cyborg himself. Unfortunately, he is momentarily distracted from this revelation, and it allows the zombie Wonder Woman to kill him. Still, while life is fleeting and death is forever, the monster of death could at least be behind those humans who soon arrive at Earth 2.
Unlike Marvel zombies, Deceased exemplifies the DC universe in a way that is definitely more reflective of its universe. The specter of death may remain, but hope springs eternal. Although, we all know what we truly hope for. 30 days of horror stories from the Longbox of the Damned. Spiraling salutations, my children! We've spent these last few years looking at Junji Ito's multi-chapter stories. Perhaps it's time we ventured into his shorter material, his fragments of horror.
Most of Junji Ito's work is made up of short stories. You've probably seen many of them already. Let's take a look at a few samplings, shall we? Starting off with Futon.
So, the story of that idiot over there.
Eat a dick, Moarte!
Eat mine! It's 7 feet long and made of spiders!
Tomio stays on his futon all day, cowering under the sheets as he stares out. His wife, Madoka, doesn't understand why he's like this, and he says it's because of all the dark nature spirits surrounding them. He wants her to hide in the futon too, but she doesn't see them. At least until one night, when the air itself is full of monsters. Tomio points out one in particular, a naked woman whom he cheated on her with, who turned out to be a witch. Fleeing the monsters, Madoka does not return to their apartment until a month later, discovering him barely alive and covered in some spongy mold within it that was causing hallucinations. And that's the end.
Fragments of story that's actually all a dream caused by mold.
Next up is Wooden Spirit, about a woman, Megumi, and her father who still live in a house that's been in their family for generations. The house has become a registered cultural property, and thus they give tours in it. Another woman, Manami, comes by because she wants to live in the house too. She's enamored with the architecture of the house, even calls it sexy. The father agrees, eventually falling in love and marrying her. But then he falls into depression as he starts viewing the house differently. And Manami starts rubbing her naked body against the wood.
It does not seem like a good way to clean a cultural asset.
Eyes start forming in the wood grain, the whole place mutating along with Manami herself, who has become a part of the walls. As the father explains to Megumi, she was a pervert. She lusted after buildings, and they lusted after her. And it's not their house anymore. Next up, Red Turtleneck. Tomio here goes to see his ex-girlfriend while continually holding his hands to his head. They had broken up 3 days ago because he had been cheating on her with another woman, a fortune teller who has special appreciation for his head and neck. So much so that she wants to sever it from his body, even showing off all the other heads she's removed with some very fine wire. Her own hair! She cuts his neck, the blood oozing onto his white turtleneck and turning it red. She's already severed his head, and now his hands are the only thing keeping it in place, and all the nerves connected. If he moves it, he'll be a dead man. She calls for an ambulance, especially when at one moment his head does pop off, but instead the witch arrives to take the head. She does what she can to make him remove it, slice it more with a tarot card, shove a cockroach in, and eventually his ex-girlfriend stabs the witch with some scissors. Like with the detached head, it takes her a moment to die, leaving behind 3 little goblins that manage to get the head off. But they disappear, and she pops his head back on, reattaching with only a mark left to indicate that anything had occurred. And he never takes his hands off again, because of the terror of what had happened.
Must be really hard to get his pants off.
Next we have Gentle Goodbye, about a girl named Riko who marries into a rather large family full of many older family members, some of whom are quite transparent. Her husband explains that they're after images. When a family member dies, the group gets together and prays very, very hard the image of their family member returning. They're not exactly ghosts. They don't physically exist, but they're still around and they can talk, though never anything beyond what the image they created would say. Eventually, the images fade over time, becoming hazier until they vanish after 20 years or so, giving plenty of time to say goodbye and move on. And soon, even Riko is revealed to be an afterimage, killed shortly before their marriage.
It is a ghost story, my children. And ghost stories are not always horror. Sometimes they're just a gentle goodbye. So anyway, here's a story about the woman who wants to be dissected.
Yes, Dissection-chan is next, and indeed, it features a boy named Kamata who tells the story of a girl he used to know, Ruriko, who was absolutely obsessed with dissection, dissecting animals alive, until finally she wants to be dissected herself. Mostly it stems from a weird pain in her stomach, which only gets worse when he sees her as an adult when something gurgles within her. Eventually she dies, probably because eventually some people started stabbing when she kept demanding they dissect her, and her actual dissection revealed Well, apparently all those creatures she cut up got to see what her insides were like too. Now we have the tale of Blackbird, about a man who fell and injured himself while hiking, who finally gets rescued. After a month, he claims to have survived by rationing food in his backpack. He asks the other man who found him, Kume, to stay with him that night and keep watch. And indeed, in the middle of the night, he sees a strange woman seeming to be kissing him at night before fleeing. And the hiker spits out the raw meat she had been giving him. He explains that this woman is what kept him alive, regurgitating raw meat into his mouth each night to keep him going. The next night she comes again, and Kume chases her off, only for her to sprout wings and fly away. A few years later, the hiker died, his body discovered on the summit of Mount Fuji, his flesh pecked clean, and a large blackbird was seen over the corpse. They later found his journal, where he confessed that the woman kept coming to him, and when he yelled at her to stop feeding him, she began biting into his flesh and taking it away. DNA tests on the raw meat he had been fed confirmed it was indeed his own flesh. He fled, but she just took him to the mountain and kept taking his own flesh and feeding him in the past until he died. How? Who can say? Although unfortunately, Kume starts to get a first-hand account of such a thing when he falls down on a hike as well. Our next story is Magame Nanakuse, about the woman in question, a novelist known for making addictive writing specializing in habits or quirks a person exhibits, eating, drinking, just odd behavior. A quite obsessive fan of hers is invited to her home, but then Nanakuse just starts hurling insults at her while exhibiting disgusting tics of her own. The two do start drinking heavily, the fan managing to drink her under the table, and later Nanakuse says she might have potential, having her thrown in a dungeon. Said dungeon is full of strange people all exhibiting bizarre tics and quirks. Nanakuse wants something unique, some tick she's never seen before, that she can use in her next novel. Refusing to cooperate, the fan starts not to move. But when she does, it's so stiff. If she moves her skin at all, it stays stuck like that, as Nanakuse observes when she comes down to check on the now wrinkly fan. And clearly it will make for a great novel.
Not for an especially great story, though.
Finally, we have Whispering Woman. Mayumi is a young girl plagued by obsessive indecision, unable to decide what to do at any given moment and constantly questioning everything. Nannies and caretakers are brought in to help, but their constant demands for guidance and instruction are too much. However, a new woman, Mitsu, arrives who thinks she can handle it, and indeed progress is made as Mayumi becomes more stable, though Mitsu herself seemed to be getting strange. She would stay with Mayumi for 16 hours at a time and stagger home, constantly whispering in her ear. She's also completely exhausted and has bruises on her face. Mayumi's father has a detective learn more about Mitsu, and how she has a heavily abusive boyfriend who takes all her money and beats her. The father, though sad about this, is worried that driving off the boyfriend will free Mitsu from Mayumi and reverse all the progress that's been made. Eventually, she dies, her body completely emaciated, but Mayumi says that she still talks to her, and one can even still hear her whispering in the wind. Until one night when Mayumi comes home covered in blood and holding a knife, because she killed the boyfriend on Mitsu's whispering instructions.
Oh, my children, it's nice for a Junji Ito story to have a pleasant and happy ending for once. Supernatural salutations, my children! I have realized that we don't check in enough with Marvel's classic horror characters. So starting this year, we will rectify that with more regular appearances. Beginning, of course, with the living mummy.
When last we left Nkantu, Warrior King, who had been entombed for 3,000 years, only to be awoken again when the paralyzing potion used on him finally wore off, he was fleeing from the police who sought to end his existence once and for all, despite bullets having no effect on the undead being. However, he quite literally vanished down an alleyway. So, where has he disappeared to? Why, outer space, of course!
You know, that old mummy cliche.
Encanto finds himself transported to an alien world, momentarily believing that he is being transported to the afterlife, until a bunch of earth monsters rise up and attack him. They strike and grasp and claw and pull at the aged being, but even wrapped up in decayed bandages, he is a warrior, and he will never yield to such attacks. Still, he can only think of all the violence that he has experienced since waking up in a museum, being shot at, fighting muggers, the police. Will this mummy ever know peace? Well, not for a while, since after the ground creatures finally retreated to the dirt, he is beset upon by living miniature tornadoes. These new attackers are allied with volcanic bursts from the ground that spray molten fire upon him. Still, such fire does not burn off his bandages. Instead, a foul, heavy rain hits him until he is too weary to fight the returning earth creatures. He is captured and brought to a palace, one for the gods, as Encanto speculates. And the gods are apparently very eclectic in their fashion senses. Skulls, capes, and green women in bikinis.
And with a mummy there too, this has suddenly become my kind of place.
Using their power, these masters and lords of the elements communicate with Encanto, explaining that they brought him here. They are the elementals who made their presence felt on Earth even before the time of Atlantis. They attempted to expand their influence across the entire Earth, but were stopped at Egypt. A young warrior named Don joined forces with a wizard named Garrett. They combined their souls and power into a ruby gem shaped like a scarab that sapped the elementals of their powers and banished the elementals to this planet. They wish to return to Earth and claim it as their own. They want Encanto to retrieve the ruby for them, offering to return Encanto to true life again for his help. But Encanto, while tempted, refuses to help enslave anyone ever again. They attack Encanto, demand his service, but it is only the aforementioned bikini, or rather wind elemental, Zephyr, who can use her own powers to take control of Encanto and dispatch him for their task. He is sent back to Earth to a pyramid being studied by a man named Professor Abdol. He is ordered to take the scarab, even if he must kill him. Meanwhile, on the subject of scarabs, Dr. Scarab, the Egyptologist who originally found Encanto, has some kind of psychic link with him that allows him to know that the mummy is back in Egypt.
I wonder if it also told him about the mummy being in space.
Meanwhile, Encanto begins his advance on the pyramid, to the horror of this guard. And I'd be pretty scared too, considering the mummy's arms apparently expanded and grew like twice their normal size.
Will the living mummy retrieve the ruby and set free the elementals? Will he ever be free of the control of others? Or perhaps even return to true life? Well, we'll see about that next year, my children. My children, in the early 2010s, the Savannah College of Art and Design helped create a series of adaptations of classic episodes of The Twilight Zone based on the original scripts. So let's see how they handle the tale of paranoia and alien encounters in a little diner.
It's a blizzard of a night in a small town. Two state troopers receive a frightened call from a local that something crashed in the nearby woods, taking the tops off trees in the process. Whatever it was crashed into a pond, and something emerged from that pond, leaving inhuman footprints in the snow. The footprints lead to a Haley's Diner and a bus parked outside of it. As one state trooper calls in what they found, and in turn learning that a bridge nearby has been closed off due to excessive ice, his partner discovers that the footprints take on a more humanoid appearance to them. Size 9.5 shoes at that.
This is the best adaptation of Cinderella ever!
The task for these troopers, as the good Mr. Rod Serling informs us, is to find a Martian in a diner. No small task at that, as they enter and look upon the cast of characters before them. The only ones in the diner are the owner, Haley himself, the bus driver, and his passengers. The bus driver is convinced that he only had 6 people join him on the bus, absolutely certain of this count. But there are 7 who claim to be those passengers. One in particular, a surly sort, is upset upon hearing about the closed bridge. He insists he has to be in Boston by 9 a.m. for an important meeting after all. The bus driver has no passenger manifest due to being a business that has fallen on hard times as of late, so they take anyone they can get. And due to the blizzard, while the driver was able to count the passengers, he didn't get a good look at any of them. When the troopers start trying to figure out who among the group could be the alien they seek, they admit that fact to the patrons. The surly man insists on a lawyer if they're going to be grilled like this. An old man at the counter just laughs about the whole thing, though both men say they don't recall seeing each other on the bus. A few ideas are thrown out to narrow things down. Eliminate the couples, for instance. After all, only 1 alien emerged from the craft, not 2.
Although we can't discount the possibility that we're fighting the Thing here.
No, that theory gets thrown out because even the couples become suspicious that their partner is not who they claim to be. Another person who could get eliminated? This woman named Ethel McConnell, a professional dancer, whom just happens to be the only one the driver especially noticed, a fact that she finds most flattering. Strange things begin to occur, the jukebox playing by itself, power going out, a window smashing in, glasses exploding.
Oh no! The alien is a ghost!
But by the end, the troopers can't really hold people on suspicion of them being from outer space, and a call is made informing them that engineers have certified the bridge is stable, so the bus and its passengers can go. The troopers will even go ahead to ensure that everything is safe. And sometime later, the surly man returns to the diner to inform Haley that the bridge did indeed collapse, killing everyone on the bus and the 2 troopers. It seems he was the alien they were looking for, and has been using his powers of illusion on them. The phone call was a fake, the glass never shattered. And this alien with his 3rd arm makes himself some coffee and informs Haley that he's the advanced scout from Mars, that Earth has been targeted for colonization to take advantage of all its liquids. Unfortunately for him, Haley informs him that indeed Earth is a great place to colonize, and he, as a citizen of the planet Venus, found that out long ago, and his forces have been on Earth for some time now, doing just that, and that his Martian invasion has already been intercepted. And so he takes off his chef's hat to reveal his extra set of eyes, and tells the surly man to enjoy some more coffee while he goes to greet the next phalanx of colonists.
A great adaptation, my children, adding in details that never made it to the episode. Visual spectacles not really possible for the budget at the time, and still retaining the great writing one would hope to find in the Twilight Zone. Darkness falls across the land, my children. It has been several years since we visited the pages of Vincent Price Presents. Sometimes he was the host of the stories, and sometimes he played a more active role, as in this tale, The House of the Raven.
Dr. Emmanuel von Horn invites his old compatriot, Dr. Aubrey Pitt, to a meeting at his seaside castle estate. After they exchange some banter about their wine and adventures, Dr. Pitt in particular having earned quite a reputation as an occult detective, living a glamorous life of adventure and appearances on trashy magazines, now going by the nom de guerre of the Raven. Von Horn is very clearly annoyed by the more open activity by which Pitt carries himself, a capstone of 30 years of bitterness between the two. He thinks that Pitt wastes his knowledge on parlor tricks meant to impress blondes, instead of enjoying the power of sorcery that he trained in. Indeed, 30 years prior at the Scholomance School deep in Transylvania, they learned of black arts and the devil. Von Horn spent his time gathering arcane knowledge and power, while Pitt was more concerned with demonstrations of power, more art than science. Their friendly rivalry hit an impasse over a woman, Annabelle. Pitt dated the woman, but she hated how he seemed to be so freewheeling, not caring about future prospects or plans. She ended up marrying Von Horn because of his studious nature, and unfortunately, she has recently died. It seems she did admit some regret in not going with Pitt instead, but it is not lost loves that concern Von Horn. He's dying and needs someone to take over his collection. A dangerous one full of terrible things that must never escape. The energy needed to contain such a thing has taken its toll on Von Horn, and he's not taking no for an answer, threatening Pitt with a gun if he does not accept. To help ensure Pitt's cooperation, since he wants to decline, Von Horn has been recently bitten by a werewolf. In 3 hours, the full moon will rise, and he's locked up the castle with no chance for escape, save for a single silver bullet hidden somewhere in the house. With no other choice, Pitt explores the house, finding Wall, a captured Archduke of Hell, in the basement. Wall offers him assistance in defeating Von Horn, as well as resurrecting Annabelle, if he helps him escape, but Pitt declines, needing information he can trust. Using magic, he summons the spirit of Annabelle for assistance, though she admits that sadly he has used magic to bind her from telling where it is. Fortunately, she does hint, where would he keep the one thing that would kill him?
Safety deposit box?
The werewolf Von Horn chases Pitt around, temporarily slowed by the silver nitrate in a mirror that Pitt throws at him. He eventually corners Pitt back in the study where they had drunk wine together, Pitt having realized that Von Horn kept the bullet in the gun he had threatened him with. He uses it and kills Von Horn, who admits that he wanted him to succeed. As much as he doesn't want to, Pitt has now inherited the house and knows of the evils that must be contained within it. And what's more, Von Horn will join the collection now as a ghost to haunt him for the rest of his days. Oh, what adventure shall play out in this situation, eh?
There was one more tale of the Raven after this, my children. But that is a story for another time. For this one, though, it was a glorious little tale and acts as a pilot to more adventures. Maybe someday we'll see more of the Raven and the dark treasures he must guard. Hill House, hello, my children! It seems DC has been very busy on the horror front, releasing not only the little Nettle series full of nightmare Batmen, deceased with their zombie superheroes, but also an entire line of horror comics in the DC Black Label called Hill House Comics, presented by Joe Hill. So, let's look at one of those, shall we?
Friends since childhood, Elle and Octavia wake up in the movie theater one night at the end of the film. But something is clearly wrong. Octavia's shoes have mud on them, and later, Elle admits that when she got home that night, she found that her underwear was inside out. Josh, a kid Elle has known since kindergarten, just grins and asks if they enjoyed the movie after claiming they were the only ones in the theater. After spotting a strange deer-like creature with a human torso attached to it, we learn some more of these strange things that happen in the town of Shudder to Think, Pennsylvania, of how women used to just forget things all the time in the past, wake up in a strange place, or not even remember their own names, of how the place used to be a mining town full of soot and smoke that tends to happen in a place like this, until one night when there was some kind of strange fire in all the coal mines at once, the ground splitting open and fire and heat emitting from it all the time. People disappeared, apparently, venturing down into the mines and never coming back up. Miners refused to re-enter the tunnels. New ones were brought in to replace them, who eventually refused to, and the company shut the operation down. They tried to encourage people to leave, but many just stayed for any number of reasons. As Elle narrates, it's like a slow apocalypse. One day someone will wake up and shudder to think, and they'll be the last person there. And it seems it's getting closer than ever, since Octavia manages to have some fun times with a hot classmate she's really into, Jessica, and her stomach is opening up a gash, just like the ones in the ground that spits fire. The two friends first met when Elle rescued Octavia from some kind of skinless person that tried to attack her near the forest that had emerged from one of the sinkholes.
Seems like the kind of thing you'd talk about more often, but then again, people do forget things around here.
Based on a remark Josh makes, the two go to a party at the old Heaven on Earth resort, a now abandoned building in the woods, and Octavia finds a bunch of glowing blue mushrooms. Elle, wanting to press the issue of what happened at the theater, just leads the two to have a fight. Octavia takes a sample of one and brings it to the old witch of the town. Octavia also asks if she can provide something to restore her memories of what happened at the theater. She can, but only so much to help. Meanwhile, Elle decides to return to the spot where the two first met and encounters another skinless creature, barely able to fight it off and throw it back in the crevice it crawled out of. Octavia goes to visit Jessica. She finally talks to Jessica about that whole hole in her thing. Jessica brings her to her mother, who's bedridden, you could say. Jessica doesn't quite understand it herself. Her mother is a sinkhole, or is turning into one. Apparently her grandmother had it too. When she's happy and joyous and relaxed, it opens up and she needed to tense up and pull it back together. But a few years ago, it stopped closing up. She awoke as a wound in the earth and stayed that way. The same shall happen to Jessica eventually.
On the plus side, it happened in bed, so at least it's nice and comfortable.
The two friends reunite and discuss what's been going on, including wondering whether they should take the potion or not. Although that discussion is interrupted when more skinless people emerge and attack Elle's house. However, the deer creature soon makes its presence known, attacking and slaughtering the skinless beings, and unfortunately also gouging Elle's father in the stomach. While her mother takes him to the hospital, the two head to the town witch on her mother's instructions. Apparently the witch owes Elle's mother a favor, and she uses it to make sure her father lives. They finally demand to know what the hell the deal is with this town, and she tells them the story of a foreman for the mines who once came to the front door of her house when she was a child and asked if she would like to see something beautiful. So he took her up the mountain. Before the resort was there was a sanatorium and water nearby that was supposed to help with healing. The foreman tried to make her drink the water, but she screamed for help and she got it. The foreman arrested. They found him in his cell hung from a rope. Most likely suicide, but suspicion of something else. She met a woman who was a witch, who taught her tricks and trade, and most importantly told her to never drink the water. The water was what took away their memories. Even just a few drops was all it took to wipe away a few minutes. The witch who taught her eventually found a cure for the water that restored memories, the secret ingredient being that mushroom. But unfortunately, when she drank this new potion, it unlocked memories of the foreman doing things to her many, many times beforehand, and using the water to wipe her memory. The advantage of the mushroom concoction was that it also made you immune to the memory-erasing water. It was a conspiracy of men behind using the water to do what they liked, and they came and took the teacher witch, eventually killing her and then running amok on the town, giving so much of the water to women that they would suffer the odd blackouts and lapses in memory that would occur in the past. The witch, deciding to do something about it, tried to cast a spell that would send any of the men who had touched the source of the water into it, drown them in their own forgetfulness again and again. But something went wrong. Instead of sending water into their lungs, it sent fire and smoke. She did not know what to do for the women. Restoring their memories in full could destroy them, so she opted for a slightly more horrific option. She tried to combine them with nature, make them beautiful as part of it, And instead she made women who were also rabbits, trees who were also women who collapsed into sinkholes, and one terrible woman who was a deer, but not. Always smoldering with rage, and the men whom she had tried to punish kept emerging from the holes to teach their sons about how to bend the world to their will.
Gotta say, Witch, your track record for this magic is not exactly filling me with confidence.
She gives them a concentrated version of the memory-restoring potion and head to Octavia's home, but learn that Jessica was going to a party at the resort ruins with a number of boys, including Josh. They arrive too late for Jessica, and Octavia simply lays out Josh, who taunts her with what he did. The skinless creatures soon emerge from the woods and converge on them, but so does the deer creature, which points out the growing mushrooms to Elle. She takes one, and so does Jessica, whose memories of what happened cause her to collapse into a sinkhole, and then form back into a person again, swallowing up the creatures and the boys. It was clear that most of the town knew at least some of what had happened, so the girls take it upon themselves to ensure that everyone had a choice. 2 drinks, one to forget, one to remember, and let them decide what they wanted. What does Octavia choose to drink? Well, I think that's up to you to decide.
The Lolo Woods is ultimately a tale of choice. The ones we make for ourselves, because in the end, we must choose to remember or forget the terrible things that have happened to us. And I hope that it's for the best. No laughter this time, my children, for that is my choice. I leave you with a smile, because this is a great story to read. Take me out to the ghoul game, my children! It's sports season here in the finest in illustrated horror. Time to throw some blood bowls and listen to the cracks of bats and spine here in Creepy.
We start our first inning off with Team Player. The baseball team known as the Sentinels have been having a bit of a mixed season. They've been winning games, but only thanks to a single one of their players, Carl Fletcher, who seems to be good in all positions on the field. At the post-game press conference, there's a lot of speculation that Carl will be traded to another team, but he announced that he'll be staying on for his last year playing the game, even if he has to do all the work himself. This riles up the other teammates, but Carl doesn't care. He knows he's better than everyone else on the team. Of course, his manager is even more upset. They stood to make $100 million by trading him. Carl still doesn't care though, until he mentions how he got so good. A drug that enhanced his own abilities, while draining the abilities of his entire team around him.
Pretty sure this was the plot of Space Jam.
When the manager threatens to go find someone else to do this with, Carl attacks him and beats him to death with a baseball bat, not seeing that in his final moments, he calls one of Carl's teammates. He later returns to the parking garage to clean up the murder, but finds that the body has already been taken away, and his teammates informed of what he has done. And all are too pleased to rip Carl apart so they can get their talent back.
That is how I wish Space Jam had ended.
Unfortunately, the remaining rounds are less sports-themed, which is weird because usually when the cover introduces something like that, it goes throughout the rest. Not that I'm complaining though, because we have our next story, Mad Jack's Girl. The titular Mad Jack is the leader of a gang that kills an old shopkeeper. His girlfriend, Alice, seems to know about it, yet Jack denies involvement, though is more surprised when she mentions that he was messed up, not that he was dead, since he could have sworn he did kill him. Later, his gang rob an old woman's house, and another member of the gang insists on taking 50% of their earnings, given the work he's done, but Jack wants it as an even split among them all. In the scuffle, Jack kills his partner too. He stops by Alice's place later, only to find both people he killed sitting in her dining room. They are very clearly dead and decaying, but Alice insists they're both okay, and she's just taking care of them after his attacks, like the old man. He lost an eye, but she's replaced it with a button. She kills Jack too, and sets him up at the table to ensure that she can take care of all three and make them all better.
Ah, relationship goals.
Finally, we have acquisitions. Rich old John Paul Major has died on his 99th birthday. His daughter, Catherine, stays at the old home the night after his funeral, planning on selling his collection of artwork and relics so that she can retire early. In particular, the collection includes the greatest painting by Hieronymus Bosch. That night, she's awoken by noise downstairs, and we see what that noise is. The figures in a nearby painting have come alive and emerged from the art, led by Bosch himself. It seems his death on the particular objects he surrounded himself with were part of a ritual, one that would allow him immortality within the painting, which John Paul Major now requests from Bosch. Who refuses? His petty grifts on swindling in life were nothing compared to Catherine, who they bring out from the shadows, stealing from her own family treasures for her own greed? Perfect! They grant her the immortality he sought, dragging her into the painting while she tries to plead that it's only a dream. And the next day, the moving people arrive to take the painting to the Met, where I'm sure Catherine will enjoy her new home.
While there may not have been as many sports as advertised, my children, we still got a bit of culture from today's issue of Creepy, eh? Spill the Gorgon's blood, my children! I really enjoy these annual chances to think about revenge from beyond the grave. So let's see what happens when the latest back to life meets someone who is actually repentant.
Michael and Jan Corby are driving on their way to their honeymoon, taking a whole freaking page to talk about how happy they are to be married and how marriage is so wonderful and they're so happy and how nothing terrible could possibly happen to them.
Honestly, it'd probably be a bigger twist if it turned out these two actually killed someone else who ended up resurrected by the board.
But no, two carjackers attack their just-married car and rip the two from it. One of the two, Eric, is more aggressive than the other, especially when Jan bites his arm. In his anger, he shoots Jan dead. The other, Daryl, in his panic, shoots Michael, and the two drive off in the stolen car, leaving the newlyweds to die.
Before we get back to the murder and mayhem, it's story time with the crows! Ever wonder why the crows try to put the wrong things right?
The myth is also about why crows are black. Originally, a white crow was left by the god Apollo to watch over his wife Coronis. When Coronis admitted her infidelity with another man, though the child was still Apollo's, Apollo unleashed a fiery revenge against Coronis. The crow caught in the fire and burnt black. They have been spirits of revenge ever since. Coronis' child survived, named Asclepius, and became a great healer, using the blood of Medusa to cure the sick and raise the dead, which the crows have been using ever since to bring back those who need to put the wrong things right. And it is said among the crows that they shall remain black as long as violence is repaid with violence.
Which, considering they could just stop bringing people back, then, that they prefer the gothier color scheme.
Michael Corby is returned to life 15 years later. The crow who brought him back is actually named this time Hugo, and brings him to a library to learn what happened after his death. It seems that Daryl was caught by the police and sentenced to 15 years for the murder. Like last year's crow resurrection implies that he just wants justice, but this time around Hugo points out that justice is a concept for the living. The dead only understand revenge, and his only hope to see Jan again is to take that revenge. And so he hunts down Daryl and Eric. But here's where we get a twist on things, my children. You see, Daryl has not been idle for those 15 years in prison. He has tried his best to become a better person, especially thanks to nightmares about Michael rising from the grave to take his vengeance out on him. And indeed, after he gets out of prison, reuniting happily with his family, he goes out for a drive with Eric, who ends up quickly killed when Michael attacks. But all Daryl can do is ask for forgiveness. He knows he would have seen him sooner or later, either in this life or the next.
And of course, while he can ask for forgiveness, there is no sacrifice he can make that will appease the god of vengeance who resurrected him.
Michael does let him go, but only because he wants Daryl to be afraid when he does it. A police officer, Detective Jacobs, investigates all this and realizes that somehow Michael is alive, well, dead, and hunting Daryl down. They struggle, Michael suggesting that the cop is really no different than the criminals, answering all their problems with violence. But before that debate can be got into, Daryl sacrifices himself, pointing out that he's the one that Michael wants. His blood is on his hands after all. By this point, Michael just wants this to end. He doesn't know if there really is a difference between revenge and justice anymore. But as Daryl says, there may not be a difference in this life, but maybe in the next one. While Michael may never be able to forgive Daryl for what he did, Daryl forgives Michael for what he must do. And his neck gets snapped, Michael finally collapsing as the Gorgon blood exits his veins. That night, Detective Jacobs has a dream of Hugo the Crow and his new white feathers. And as he peers at Daryl appearing in the rain as well, even Hugo must wonder, since the crows will only remain black as long as violence is repaid with violence. Is this the end, or a new beginning?
Well, considering there are still more tales of the crow out there, I'm guessing it's not truly the end. The dark side is always there, waiting for us to enter, my children. Waiting to enter us. Yes, Tales from the Dark Side, the lesser celebrated anthology of the 80s. It was going to be rebooted a few years ago, but it never ended up being made. Except it was. In comic form.
Joe Hill, whom we last saw relating back to the Low, Low Woods, brings us these tales, starting with Sleepwalker.
I'm wondering if this one also features an eldritch abomination possessing a comic book reviewer. One can only hope!
The plan was to have an anthology with an ongoing story. Each one would be standalone, but when viewed together, would have all the pieces match up. Anyway, let's meet Ziggy, lifeguard at Forever Summer Pools. He's living the dream this summer. His mother is away on business, he gets to have parties every night, and 98% of his job is just looking good.
7 out of 10 for me.
But as he points out, the thing about living your dreams is that it doesn't leave much time for sleep. He recounts how the summer almost didn't happen. Halfway through his senior year, he overslept and missed his English final. He failed for the semester and would have to take summer school, but his teacher made a deal. A girl named Madeline was doing a special project over winter break, filming a scene from Richard III to get into a Shakespeare study course in England. Help her with the project and get her admitted, and he'd get the A he needed to graduate. They succeeded, Ziggy doing a pretty good job in his acting, and promised Maddie that he'd see her when she got back. But then there were the parties with all the bikini babes, and, well, when she returned, she was less than happy to see him. And unfortunately, he seems to either daydream or fall asleep at his post, and a woman drowns in the water. At the hearing, though, his expensive lawyer hired by his mother has medical evidence that proves that she had a weakness in her heart, and there was nothing he could have done to save her, even if he had tried. Regardless, he still feels pretty guilty over the whole thing, and the woman's husband remains enraged by the whole affair, since he shouldn't have been sleeping on the job to begin with. Ziggy's guilt overpowers his life. No more parties, no more friends, just wallowing in self-pity and insomnia. When he did step outside, he was shocked that the world seemed to move on from the whole thing. Until one day when everything went dark. Flowers wilted, cats with 3 eyes appeared, a fork-tongued crow cawed, and a man yells at Ziggy that this is a dark side event and that they don't have much time. But as the event passes, the man collapses and falls asleep. And so too does everyone else around Ziggy. It seems anyone who looks at him falls asleep. He stops screaming for help because anyone who came running just fell unconscious before reaching him. With no other choice, he calls Maddie for help, but she too falls asleep. He puts on the tragedy mask from their Richard III performance, which seems to allow her to stay awake. After explaining what's happening, they are stopped by the husband, who takes them at gunpoint. He wants to kill Ziggy with sleeping pills and then drive him off a cliff. He says he'll only let Maddie go if he agrees. Ziggy, believing himself guilty and wanting to save Maddie's life, agrees. But the husband insists he see his face when he does so, and he falls asleep at the wheel. They teeter on the edge of a cliff, and Ziggy is able to save the husband, but Maddie is handcuffed to the inside of the car. He can't get her out, and she tries to tell him to leave, but he refuses. As such, her last request is to go out on a sweet dream, and thus she goes to sleep as they kiss, falling to their deaths.
A tragic end for Ziggy, perhaps, but poetic in its own way. It is to be expected when there is an unseen underworld, a place that is just as real, but not as brightly lit. Hello, my children! As I said a week ago, I want to spotlight some more of Marvel's horror characters. So let's return to the Marvel Spotlight series, and the character introduced there. Jacob Russell, the werewolf by night.
When we last left Jacob, he bemoaned the fact that his promise to his mother upon her death kept him from attacking and killing his stepfather, who, despite his suspicions, did not seem to be the one who murdered her. In the meantime, during one of his werewolf spells, Jack's sister Lisa searched for him down a dangerous canyon road and was chased by a group of bikers known as the Hell Runners. Their leader, Chains, crashed his bike into her and through the window of their beach house. Deciding to make her pay for wrecking his bike, Chains and his gang prepare to attack the unconscious Lisa. But then Jack attacks, savagely beating the bikers back. Hearing the approaching cops, and realizing that the werewolf was not wearing a mask, they flee. Lisa regains consciousness, but only sees the werewolf, thinking that it might have hurt Jacob. The cops enter and spot the werewolf, causing the beast to flee as well into a forest to find some prey. It has been 2 months since the death of his mother, and Jacob has spent more and more time at the beach house than at home. After the police finally leave, Jacob sleeps and returns to normal, lamenting that he needs to tell someone of his curse, wanting that to be Lisa since she too may have inherited it from their father. And yet he fears the fact that he almost killed her. He hitchhikes back to his home, but is picked up by an associate of his stepfather named Nathan Timley. He admits that he knows Jacob is a werewolf, and that he and his wife have been following his exploits as of late, and think they can solve his problem. He's brought to Nathan's home, where a bullet wound he had received while in wolf form has not healed, and Jacob starts to fall ill. Unfortunately, his wife, Andrea, does not seem to grasp the full extent of his illness and tries to interrogate him, wanting to know about a book that his father was supposed to have left him after his mother died. He passes out, not knowing what she's talking about, and is put into a dungeon in chains. The Tibleys have a hunchbacked servant, Craig, who also has a metal hand, who is left to guard Jack, though it seems he suffered his own abuse at the hands of the Timleys too. Nathan tried to bring food to Jack that night, but he is transformed into a werewolf and only sees him as a betrayer, attacking him and almost killing him before Craig defends his master. The two are evenly matched, but the fight is stopped once more by Andrea, or Wait, is her name Agatha? Suddenly her name has changed.
Or is Agatha like her superhero name? This does take place in the Marvel Universe, after all.
Once he's human again, he tries to explain to them that he really does not know about the book they're after. A book of his father's spells called the Darkhold that they thought his mother would have passed on to him. He keeps saying he knows nothing about it, only that she told him of his werewolf curse. But Agatha does not believe him, and Crag roughs him up some more. Nathan tries to intervene, but Crag, angered by this, strikes and kills Nathan. Agatha is unconcerned, at least until she notices that Jacob has fled in the confusion. He hides in the stable and falls unconscious again, turning into a werewolf that night as he awakens. Agatha senses the transformation and sends Crag after him once more, the brute able to outfight the werewolf, at least until he raises his metal hand in the sky and is struck by lightning. Jacob passes out again and dreams of Agatha's fate. It seems that she needed the book for some ritual to invoke ancient, long-dead gods. And I guess she was on a time crunch or something, because she couldn't wait any longer to do this, and of course failed miserably without it, instead dying from the attempt, and she is consumed in fire. When Jacob recovers, he realizes he must seek out his father's book. It may hold information to help him with his terrible curse.
And this, my children, is why you should be nice to your puppies and doggos. How else will you get them to cooperate with you if you just yank their leash around, eh? Good evening, my children. I know around here I'm always telling stories, but this one is a bit more suited to what one normally tells children, in that it is a fairy tale. I mean, it's still full of blood and horror, but it's a fairy tale nonetheless. Once upon a time,
a cat arrived at a castle during a rainstorm and met a countess who owned it. The countess seemed to be expecting the cat, even inviting her to sit by the fire and make herself a drink. The countess helped the cat remove her coat, almost like she was removing skin.
Which is an acquired skill, my children. Most of the time it's like trying to peel off a price sticker on a book, but I digress.
The cat admits to her that she is there to kill her, and the countess says she forgives the cat. She is far from the first to try. The countess can smell the cat's timidity and fear, and it stinks. She tells her to go upstairs and take a bath, which she agreed to. The countess was seductive and alluring, even as blood very plainly dripped from her fangs. The cat saw fit to lock the door after she left. The rain and cold had stripped her of her purpose, but the bath offered no warmth, nor did the constant banging on the bathroom door, yet no one was on the other side. The cat sought out the countess and saw her in her room, peeking in through the keyhole. She saw the countess do up her hair, check her lipstick, monstrously rise up from her own skin before returning again, and looking right back at her through the peephole. "Is it now, then?" she asked. "Is it now that you kill me?" The countess was ever so bored, and the stink of timidity was still on the feline, as she demanded the animal to answer her. The countess pulled the cat down the halls until they came to door after door, all of them red. She asked the cat if she wondered what happened to those who came before, and to choose a door.
This is a very creepy way of telling the cat she's won a new car.
Behind the doors were stories, brief fairy tales in themselves, each describing a cat encountering a person, and encouraging mutilation and murder in its wake on the way to a castle. And when the cat pulls her hand back, it is covered in blood. The cat began to wonder if any of these tales were her tale, her story, or was she the cat who had led those people to their doom? She once again sought the countess, finding her in a coffin and slithering out like the snake she was. She asks the cat if she blames herself for leading them to the castle, for what they became. The unraveled things behind those doors, stained with blood freely given by those that entered. But that's not really important, is it? After all, the cat came to kill her, so she'd better get on with it. But not before the Countess takes a bite. The cat dreams of a soothing white land on a castle with dark shadows, and a ghost sitting in it half in the dark, soon devoured by a monster. And as the Countess calls her an animal, the cat awakens and gets to her task of killing the Countess. And as she tears the Countess apart, we learn one last fairy tale of a girl who lived in a dark cellar and found a cat in a cupboard. The girl was afraid of a great beast in the floors above the cellar. The cat made an offer to the girl that they would cut off their skins and switch them, the cat promising to outwit the beast so that the girl could be freed. And so they made the switch, the girl remaining in the cupboard in the skin of a cat, while the cat in the skin of the girl told her not to move, and then left.
What does it all mean? Well, what does any fairy tale mean, my children? Be careful of the deals you make. Don't try to cheat someone out of their skin. Or, at the very least, don't always believe cats. Monstrous Monday, my children! A creature feature is a kind of horror movie focusing on a monster, usually the type of thing that'd be shown off on late-night TV with a horror host. So it's appropriate that I am doing the same with this comic and its own creature features.
The book is a black and white anthology, my children, and it begins with Bio-illogical. Bart Stanton is a wanted biological smuggler, taking biological samples on diseases and distributing them on the black market to anyone who might want to circumvent quarantine or the like on different worlds. However, he and his ship recently crashed when doctors are trying to keep him alive despite the bizarre and extensive damage done to him. In his memory, he recalls what happened, he and his partner Benedict trying to get a sample of a plant before said plant attacked Benedict. Bart tried to help him as he was dragged into a cave, only to find some aliens vivisecting Benedict alive for scientific study. We don't know exactly what happened after Bart opened fire on the aliens and fled, but his heart gives out on the operating table from the stress of remembering, and the doctors say they'll ship his body over to the research department. Next up is the grease trap. It's kinda gross, frankly, dealing with a meek man who has a shrill wife who's complaining about the clogged up toilet. The plumber, who, while a bit rude himself, at least sympathizes with the meek man for how jerkish his wife is, and talks about all sorts of mutated creatures that can grow in septic systems, including the squid-like being that soon eats him. And, well, the meek man decides his wife might want to take a look at this herself.
Pretty sure this is just the crate from Creepshow, but with more poop.
Let's move on to Mosquito. The greatest warrior in a tribe wants to find himself a wife, but thinks none of the women in his village are beautiful enough.
Greatest warrior, greatest jerkass.
In a nearby village, he finds a woman he considers to be the most beautiful he has ever seen, and curiously, has no wife. The village elders tell him it's because she's actually a demon.
Which is odd then that they just let her continue to stay in the village.
And the warrior balks at this idea and marries her, taking her back to his own village. His rudimentary tests to see if she really is a demon don't find anything wrong, so he writes it off. Soon, however, people in the village start dying off, something going out at night and sucking all the blood from their bodies. Eventually, it is proven to indeed be the wife, and the warrior tricks her into a hut to burn her to death. She pleads to be let out and to drink one more person's blood, claiming that she has been a demon for 300 years, but one more person's blood will make her human. He resists doing so, but out of the ashes emerges a tiny insect that sucks some blood from the warrior's arm. The first mosquito. We continue with the Cult of the Eye. A woman is searching for information on a cult that has brought about an apocalypse. Large creatures looking like floating eyeballs have been attacking and devouring people. Her search brings her to a man named Bauer who runs the cult, but he claims the eyes will bring about the next stage of human evolution, that their creation was done through the mind of a scientist named Professor Lobley. She hunts down Lobley, who claims that the eyes have somehow come about because of his own imagination, belief from the cult channeling their power through his mind. Unfortunately, as the woman tells him, the eyes have their own independent thought and agenda, and will soon kill everyone who isn't useful to them, Lobley himself included. Lobley flees with her, and when he reveals that the eyes will keep coming back as long as his imagination exists, she shoots him in the end. A not great story, my children.
Perhaps we should put it to vote. All who enjoyed the story say aye. The eyes have it!
We then move on to It's an Okay Life. A man tries to commit suicide by slitting his own wrists, but can't bring himself to do it. He is visited by his guardian angel, who admits that just like the Jimmy Stewart movie, he needs to help the man not kill himself to earn his wings. Despite his efforts, the angel comes across like he doesn't actually care about the man and whether or not he commits suicide, so in the end the man hangs himself. And it's shown why he was so bad at preventing the suicide. Because he was actually a demon, and earning a very different sort of wings. And finally we end with Inside Out. An interplanetary salvage team of 3, Temi, Giovanna, and Hakim, arrive on a planet with a structure once belonging to a race called the Yargni. The Yargni died out thousands of years ago, but the technology inside of it could make them all very rich. Tracking a signal inside of it, they discover a matter teleporter still in operation, though only just barely. A Yarg had stepped into the machine a long time ago, and it was already in disrepair when it happened. The creature's teleport signals cycling over the last few centuries and degraded considerably. Despite Giovanna's objections about not wanting to tamper with the equipment, the other two believe they can save its life, and need to try if there's any hope of rescuing it as entropy increases on it. They succeed in materializing it, somewhat, as some kind of feedback occurs that turns the creature inside out. And yet it is still alive, as soon Hakim is absorbed and Giovanna begins transforming, screaming that the Yarg wants her mind and he is sucking her in. Soon the Yarg attacks again and enters Temi's brain, transforming her as well. It reveals that the Yargni were a hive mind that absorbed any others they came into contact with, wanting to bring love, community, and understanding to all beings in the universe. And will do so now with humans, trapped as they are in their isolated little minds. And thus Temi heads off to spread the joy of the Yargni and end the loneliness of the people of Earth.
But you'll never need to feel alone with me around, my children. Moarte will always be there to provide such warm, touching stories to you all. Dead men tell no tales, my children! However, they do leave behind treasure maps, and pirates and ghosts go along with each other so well, don't you think?
This is a story of treasure, my children. Aren't all pirate stories about that? It is also a story of multiple protagonists passing along the same curse as it goes, starting with a man named Kibble.
Always trust a man named after pet food.
He was first mate of the infamous Captain Kidd. During one of their raids on an English merchant ship, the Kibble and the captain find treasure in the hold. Though the two find separate ones at that. Captain Kidd finds our standard gold and silver and jewels, but atop that bounty was a bubble, a silver box that is of no interest to the captain, but of deep interest to Kibble, who recognizes medieval script upon it. Unlocking the box, he discovers a treasure map inside, one commissioned by the Knights Templar. One of Kid's victims survived the attack on the boat and warned British soldiers of Kid's activities, turning him into an outlaw. With no other choice, he claims to his crew that he is going to the governor to secure a pardon for himself, but never returns. Seizing the opportunity, Kibble claims that the captain has left him in charge and will lead them to glory with his treasure map once he deciphers it. They agree, but soon afterwards their boat sank in a hurricane, leaving Kibble the only survivor. 20 years pass and he is killed by Edward Teach, aka Blackbeard. Blackbeard was attracted to the map as soon as he found it, much like Kibble himself. It held some kind of power over both, a greed that extended from beyond the grave, as we can see from Kibble's undying corpse. Still, this is now the story of Teach and his first mate, Clump. Clump is secretly spying for Bartholomew Roberts.
Although this comic seems to think Black Bart was French and not Welsh. Unless there are two Bartholomew Roberts here. Look, I'm the horror guy, my children, not the pirate guy!
And observes Blackbeard's growing obsession with the map. We see flashbacks to the origin of the treasure that the map is leading to. A father and son in the Knights Templar discussing their legacy, sacred objects belonging to Christendom, the cup that Jesus drank from, the spear of Longinus, etc. Their power and call are immense, the Holy Grail in particular, and it is easy for greed to overcome any in their presence. The son was supposed to burn the map to where the treasures were laid to rest, but he never did. Instead, that map ended up being copied by Clump to give to Roberts, hoping to finally escape the cruel, immoral acts that Blackbeard was so eager to perpetrate. Unfortunately, a suspicious subordinate of his followed him and observed the transaction, stabbing him in the streets and reporting this to Blackbeard. To prevent Roberts from getting the treasure himself, Blackbeard pursues, but soon must break off the pursuit as their ship needs repairs, as well as because of the ghost ship that Blackbeard spots. This leads to his death, along with his head getting cut off, and yet that head reanimates like Kibble, desperate for the map and its treasure. Roberts confides in the contents of the treasure to Duncan, a cabin boy whom he is mentoring on the ship. They arrive in Nova Scotia, where the treasure is buried, and start working on digging it out. Although as they get closer and closer to their prize, Duncan can see the ghost ship that Blackbeard had spotted get closer and closer. Roberts reaches the treasure, only for the ghosts to launch their attack. While his men are slaughtered, Roberts and Duncan do manage to escape with the Holy Grail, but its effects soon take hold. Roberts becomes more withdrawn, more aggressive in his piracy and darkness. His appearance soon changes his corrupted nature, his jaw deteriorating and coated in blood. Realizing what the Grail has done to him with his greed and obsession, he orders Duncan to take the Grail and stay in the cabin regardless of anything he hears during the attack. Eventually he does exit, spotting the men throwing Roberts' body overboard to prevent the enemy soldiers from taking him. We know not of what happened after. But hey, the more important thing is that Blackbeard's corpse soon rises again in North Carolina, carrying his own head.
Pirates and horror go together well, my children. And any story that features elements from both is truly the greatest treasure there is. Expect the unexpected, my children! You know, with all the Marvel comics we've been looking at this year, let's make sure that DC gets its fair share as well, with one of its anthology comics.
Our first tale is The Evil Eyes of Night. Charlie Ames is the son of the gardener of a rich estate. His father lives on site in a shed, and the two are planning on going on a camping trip soon, so Charlie wants to give his new sleeping bag a test run outside before they go. At night, he hears strange noises until he opens his eyes and sees phantoms hunting around and making noise, one of which seems to be the words "guying thump thump."
Look, my children, to be honest, 90% of being dead is really just about trolling people.
He runs for the safety of the mansion, but when he peers in, he sees the owner of the house, Peter, confronting a thief with a gun. However, instead of calling the police or anything like that, Peter wants the thief to try to open a safe for him. It belonged to his father, missing many years now, and he wants to try to finally get it open and examine the contents. He threatens to kill the thief if he doesn't help. However, as the thief gets to work, Peter finds young Charlie spying on the scene and brings him in. When the thief completes his work, Peter informs the two that he needs to kill them to prevent any witnesses. However, it soon becomes 3 as Peter's aged mother approaches in a wheelchair, wondering what all the commotion is. Peter admits that he wants money because his father was so stingy when it came to him. The thief tackles Peter into a suit of armor, where they find the rotting corpse of his father, Peter having murdered him and put him in there many years ago. After his mother even tries running him down with the wheelchair, they chase Peter outside, where he apparently trips on the young Charlie's tent rope and shoots himself. As Charlie points out though, it was almost as if the tent rope reached out like a vengeful thing.
So I'm not sure if the message here is definitely go camping or never go camping.
Next up is The Point of Death. It's a short one, but a good one. A Mrs. Oates goes to visit her daughter Cora for the day at her and her husband's home. She cannot stand the husband, Herbert, because of his butterfly collection that he seems to cherish more than life itself. Still, Cora takes her to see him in the study where she left him. You see, last night a burglar had broken into their home.
Feels like this anthology should have been called The Burglars.
He made a swift move and managed to stab Herbert so hard that he became embedded in the wall. Cora chased the burglar off, but now Herbert gets to be a part of his own collection. Permanently. And finally we have Spirit, Why Do You Haunt Me?
Well, like I said earlier, for the lulz.
Blair is a man on a mission, driving his car in the mountains to kill a man named Professor Sarky. However, his brakes go out and his car crashes. Doctors do manage to get to him and miraculously save his life, though the doctor admits that he was legally dead for a short time. As he recovers, he thinks to himself that the accident was a blessing in disguise, that regardless of what Sarky did to his wife with his funny faith healing operation, murder is not the answer. That night, however, a spirit appears and frightens him. He calls for the nurse, who assumes he just had a nightmare. And yet she finds that his intravenous drug tube was put to full force. At that power, it would have likely put him in a coma. Assuming that the ghost was trying to kill him, he soon spots it again, thinking that his conscience in his planned murder is catching up to him. He goes to Sarky and confesses his original intentions, saying that he will instead call the police on him. Sarky won't have that, threatening him with an axe and saying that not only did he cut his brake lines originally, but also was responsible for the feeding tube. And with that, Blair realizes that the spirit, which has his own face, is actually his guardian, and it takes his revenge for him by blasting Sarky through a window into the rocky shore below.
All of these tales certainly did end unexpectedly, my children. But then, a lot of deaths in horror are unexpected. Savage salutations, my children! Oh, but we're not looking at the whole comment today. While it is full of barbaric tales of Conan, Khazar in his caveman cloth, and even Femizons, what concerns us today is a monster.
For while we have returned to several of Marvel's horror characters this year, there's still their original horror character to take a glance at, in a story called Man/Thing.
And this was before it was giant-sized even!
Yes, Man-Thing got his first appearance in Savage Tales, in a little black and white story. After the titular monster kills an alligator, the narrator wonders how long it has been in the swamp, languishing in a hell of fetid darkness, no longer recalling that once upon a time it was a man. Thoughts and memories do eventually stir inside the Man-Thing, though only glimpses. We, on the other hand, are treated to the full story. Dr. Ted Salis waits in the swamp for a government agent, Hamilton, to retrieve a chemical that he has been developing. With him is his lover, Ellen Brent, who wants to leave the godforsaken swamp. Ted is here because he fears what the chemical will be used for. More killing and death. When he closes his eyes, he can make out the voices of everyone he has helped to kill, screaming. After a few more hours pass and Hamilton doesn't arrive, Ted becomes nervous. The man is nothing if not punctual, so he decides to burn his formula for the strange chemical he's creating for safety. He grabs the only distilled solution and decides to head to Hamilton's own home to try to find him, and discovers his corpse on the floor. What's worse, he not only finds his killer standing over him and threatening him with a gun, but it turns out Ellen herself was working with them. She betrayed him because she has expensive tastes that he can't support on a civil servant salary, and she's ready to sell off the chemical to the highest bidder. Fortunately, Ted comes from a long line of adventurous scientists, so he's able to overcome the assassins and flee back to his car. Realizing he has no chance of getting away, even in the swamp, Ted decides the best thing he can do is inject himself with the chemical and dive his car into the swamp.
You're not a very smart scientist, are you?
While Ellen is frustrated that they've lost him, it seems the chemical did keep Ted alive. For a time, as the waters of the swamp begin interacting with the unstable solution in his blood, and transforms him into the grotesque man-thing. His mind soon becomes lost inside the man-thing as he is driven to the shore to attack his would-be killers. He easily takes his revenge, slaughtering the two assassins before turning his attention to Ellen. He can sense that she caused the deepest pain in him, even if he can't remember why, and touches her face, burning it with some kind of compound he can now excrete. Still, he does not kill her, letting her go as he finally looks down into the swamp water and beholds his own face. Dr. Ted Salis, indeed, being the ultimate victim of this whole affair.
Personally, I wouldn't call transforming into a swamp monster something to feel like a victim about, but maybe he just doesn't like water. But still, the man-thing. A Marvel original monster. Everyone's entitled to one good scare, my children. While Halloween Kills has been delayed till next year, that doesn't mean we shouldn't celebrate the beloved franchise here. So let's see, 42 years later, how they explored its legacy at the 30-year mark.
The book is an anthology of short stories dealing with the legacy of Michael Myers and their effects on the various people of Haddonfield. It begins with Trick or Treat, about the elderly Mackenzie couple. They loved children, but Halloween was a bit too much for them. At least until two children, the ones being babysit by Laurie Strode, compounding on the door and begging that they call the police, that the boogeyman is trying to kill them. Joe Mackenzie takes charge and gets the children in, especially after they hear gunshots from down the street. They call the police and things calm down. And after that, they always answered the door for trick-or-treaters, even after Joe passed away. Although it seems that Michael decided to pay a visit one Halloween, planting a razor blade in some of the candy. Next up is POV, which is just the story of a girl getting awarded flowers at some kind of beauty pageant before Michael kills her in her dressing room. It's done in a way so that the pages alternate from whose perspective it is. One page it's the girl, the other it's Michael. It's not bad at all, especially since the girl gets decapitated, and we always enjoy that. But it's just kind of at odds with the rest of the stories of Michael's legacy on the victims of that Halloween night. But let's move on to a different sort of point of view story. Visiting Hours, wherein we see Laurie Strode go through her life from the first Halloween, how she replays a memory in her mind of Annie Brackett and one of her last conversations with her. Through having a child, helping them through Halloween, becoming the headmistress at a private school, and there's Annie's bloody corpse repeating the conversation again while writing Samhain on the chalkboard. And then Michael returns during H2O. Laurie supposedly kills him, and winds up in the sanitarium at the beginning of Halloween Resurrection. She knows that Michael will be visiting her again soon. Visiting hours never end there. Whenever she closes her eyes, they let him in. One day he'll come and see her. One day she'll be free.
Free to fall off a roof and then come back in a different timeline 20 years later, but I'd say that's still free.
Let's check in with Tommy Doyle in 2005. He's a comic book artist now.
Which instantly makes him the most likable character to me.
And his wife is upset that their son got a hold of one of his books. The horrifying black and white story of Tarantula Man. And oh look, Tarantula Man kinda looks like me. Doesn't act like me though.
As far as you know, my children.
He's putting up missing posters for teenagers he intends to kill, sneaks into their houses to sniff their panties, then horrifically murders them by having giant spiders emerge from their throats? I don't get it. But yes, Tommy has other monsters he can draw too, like Michael Myers. And finally there's repetition compulsion. In 1989, apparently before the events of Halloween 5 really get going, Dr. Sam Loomis had a visit by Michael, and so did a teacher at the local elementary school. She encouraged her students, scared about what can happen on Halloween, to just smile. If you beam brightly, no one can hurt you.
The real problem, though, is if they smile back.
Loomis has a different attitude about such things. Michael's visit had him post a picture of a dog on a spot at the elementary school, so Loomis and his nurse go to look. They find the dog, not quite dead, and Loomis thinks that it's a message from Michael, that Loomis is nothing more than a dog, coming to him when he calls. But that might not be quite the full message, since Loomis soon hears about the teacher being murdered while he was examining the dog, her body hung up on the soccer field with a big old smile on her face.
And I do agree on that point, my children. You should definitely be thinking of the Halloween franchise and just smile. Everything old is new again, my children! It's time to look at the final issues of the main Puppet Master comics. Will everything conclude gloriously? We'll talk about it.
When last we left off with Toulon and his puppets, Anthony, their would-be master, had committed murder and voluntarily returned to the Boldeston Institute for treatment, and its director was secretly working with the Nazis. Toulon and his puppets, reunited with those of the retro puppets from the 7th movie, began their quest to find who it was that had helped instigate this recent mess and stolen the Decapitron body. Toulon recounts for the audience his early days as a puppeteer in the early 1900s, when his friends had all been murdered, and he put their souls in the retro puppets to gain revenge, letting them fade away once their task was completed. Toulon and the retro puppets traveled to West Virginia and a communal living area called Peterstown. Meanwhile, suspecting the involvement of Madame Adon, the fortune teller from earlier in the series, the modern puppets go back to her now abandoned shop, trying to find anything of value. Instead, just finding two of her former cronies trying to loot the place. And instead they get their organs looted. They depart when they find some kind of strange artifact
that frankly looks like a round version of the board game Perfection.
Arriving at Peterstown, Toulon sends the puppets Dr. Death and Cyclops into the village to scout it out before he is knocked unconscious by his own puppets in human form. Meanwhile, Neil Gallagher arrives at the Bodega Bay Police Department with Madame Adon and Anapa, stealing the body of a duplicate puppet of Jester before slaughtering everyone in the department. Back at Peterstown, Toulon meets Isaac, the head of the community, and the grandson of Peter, the German boy whom Toulon himself had befriended in the 3rd movie. Isaac set up the community in honor of Peter and his stories about Toulon, creating a place where anyone can come to be treated equally with respect. Although children will be children, as Isaac sees his own son, Jacob, be bullied by a boy named Billy. Cyclops locates one of the reasons why Toulon found this place. During the time his soul was jumping around, he ended up here, and spotted his old Mephisto puppet as well. Said puppet is less happy to see Cyclops, setting him ablaze. Toulon settles in with Carson and Gina, 2 members of the community, who have wooden replicas of themselves sitting on their couch. Isaac, in the meantime, decides he needs to discipline Billy's father for not doing well enough parenting him, and uses a few copies of Toulon's gin puppets to slaughter him for it.
See, this is a community of respect. Anyone can have that happen to them.
Carson and Gina explain that ultimately Isaac is going to transfer everyone in the community's souls into wooden bodies like those, so they can live forever.
I mean, at least until some termites come by.
He claims that these were techniques passed on from his grandfather, who learned them from Toulon. Toulon himself dispatches the rest of his retro puppets to investigate, knowing that Cyclops has been killed. Sneaking off, Isaac and his woodworking friend examine the Cyclops puppet and are unsure of where it came from. When he orders the Gin trio to take the puppet away for later, the retro puppets encounter them and fight to reclaim it, ultimately defeating them. As Toulon witnesses the Faust show being put on, the Nazi puppet collector discovers that certain Egyptian artifacts have been stolen. Toulon learns of the history of the Mephisto puppet, apparently having been given to Peter years before. Isaac also announces the great transition to puppet bodies will begin soon with the Elite Guard, those humans who resemble Toulon's puppets. Meanwhile, Anapa takes the duplicate jester body and puts his 2 other servants into it to share the head-twisting form, Camille and Dr. Jen. The transition occurs, with the humans slicing their own throats and drenching their wooden bodies in blood. And it is successful! Toulon, meanwhile, consults the retro puppets and, seeing the Jinn puppets, notes that they belong to the Egyptian man who had refined his spells so long ago in Cairo. However, before he can investigate further, Isaac announces that to show his commitment to the transition process, the first civilian to undergo the process will be his own son, Jacob.
And that's the end. Issues 21 and 22 were never published. Retro now remains unfinished.
Sadly, sales of the Puppet Master comics were not great, and Action Lab Studios needed to end the book. The final 2 parts were unprinted, and likely never will be. We shall not know the reasons for the humans so matching the puppets. Anything more of Isaac's more murderous tendencies. They are lost forever.
But rest easy, my children! While those 2 issues were not published, the story was not yet over. The next time we see the puppets, it's their curtain call. Handy hello, my children! You know, people often forget that EC Comics were not the only ones producing horror comics in the 50s. I should know. But let's take a look at the first issue of another horror anthology, Skeleton Hand!
We begin with Deathless Mortal, wherein we see the stage magician Largo fail to win over a crowd, at least until he summons a group of demonic spirits to rise up and circle the area. He has clearly made some kind of deal with these spirits, who are most eager to take him to fulfill their bargain, but agree they can do nothing until the appointed time. Martha Starr, a woman watching the performance, tells Largo that she was most impressed with his performance, but Largo thinks she may be what he needs. He hypnotizes her, leading her away from her husband and fellow magician Jed to come with him. Jed can tell she has been put under a spell, but he cannot figure out how. He tracks him down at another show where Largo's secretary, an old man, wishes Jed luck because of knowing exactly what he's going through. Jed soon observes Largo in action, using a spell to transfer Martha's youth into himself. Jed and Largo fight, but Largo summons the demon spirits again and has him taken to the Peak of Pain, a mountain where these spirits dwell. They get ready to torture him, but he speaks to them about Largo. They tell him that long ago he made a deal with them, they would be his servants until he grows old. As Jed points out, he is using his spells to keep himself young.
Which seems a bit like a technicality at best. I mean, I can walk and talk, but you would not say that I am alive because of that.
They of course want to finally deal with Largo, so Jed strikes his own deal. Give him 3 days to defeat Largo and keep him elderly, and they can have Largo, letting him go free if he succeeds. They agree and he gets to work, though as the 3 days are used up, he finds nothing useful beyond the fact that Largo is 300 years old. Remembering the secretary, he learns that he too had his wife's youth stolen by Largo.
And then took a job with him because of the poor economy, I guess.
And has been waiting 40 years to take his own revenge. They discover a black book of spells in Largo's possession, also possessing a timetable of when he needs to exchange youth with someone. Since it will be that very night, they trick Largo by having the secretary bump into him and set his watch back by 10 minutes. He misses his deadline to take Martha's youth, and the demon spirits happily take him away. Next we have Sea of Retribution. James Simon is sentenced to several years in prison for knowingly selling defective steel plates to the Navy, leading to many deaths. He doesn't care though, since his sentence will only be so long, and he has a lot of money stashed away. However, after a few months, a voice starts speaking to him in his dreams, telling him he could easily escape and live like a king now instead of later. Soon, a ghostly figure of an 18th century man arrives and uses his spirit powers to lead him out of the jail and safely to a boat, namely, the one that he had gotten sunk. The figure is John Paul Jones, the first well-known naval commander of the Revolutionary War. He comes back all the time for traitors who threaten the US Navy's ship and is doing so again, so that the dead crew can have their revenge on him. But Simon offers to instead give him the secret supply of money as recompense. Jones agrees and comes with him to his garage where he supposedly hid it. But instead, Simon shoves the ghost into the basement and locks him up, saying he'll never get out.
You don't really know much about ghosts, do you, Mr. Simon?
He makes his way to the real hiding spot, but of course, soon after retrieving the money, Jones returns and helps lead him to a watery grave. The money is recovered, and it is distributed to the families of those lost by his actions. We continue in Death for Hire. Cracker Shots, the mafia's top hitman, is arrested and found guilty for his many crimes. His boss, Leo Gorman, is soon interrogated by Senator Adam Flint, who's running a massive crackdown on organized crime. Infuriated by the senator, Gorman wishes he could kill him. And soon an opportunity comes from a professor who offers to raise Cracker from the dead as a zombie, able to continue his work for Gorman. He succeeds, though the professor states that Cracker will only obey his commands, and thus extorts more money and property out of Gorman. Deciding to finally deal with the professor and the senator, he instructs where it is he should be assassinated and replaces the bullets in the professor's own gun with blanks. Unfortunately, while Cracker is able to shoot the senator, the professor only had the one gun, so he shot him with blanks. During this, Gorman tries to kill the professor, but he's able to get to Cracker in time to order him to kill Gorman as well. And soon, both the professor and Gorman are just like Cracker, dead. Next up we have Monster of the Deep. It is shorter than the others, though not as short as the last story. Anyway, an Italian fisherman and his American compatriot are accosted by a Soviet submarine about to drop off saboteurs. They plan to murder the two fishermen, but the Italian warns that if Italy is threatened, the mythical Scylla, a giant human with tentacles and dog-like heads attached to some, will defend it.
Must have slept through World War II then.
And the Scylla attacks and kills the Soviets. Pretty straightforward, but not as much as our final tale, the one-page story, The Corpse Under the Carpet. An angry man murders his wife when she spends money on some new carpet and hides her corpse in a hole under said carpet. But he is soon brought to justice. However, the ghost of the woman can be seen rising from the carpet, demanding to be let free.
There may not have been any actual skeleton hands, my children, but it still delivered on the thrills and chills one would hope for with such a title. Let's visit the clean room, my children. It's an ordinary-looking room, but it travels, my children. And all the things you'll see when you travel. Let's read some clean room and solve all our problems.
When she was a little girl, Astrid Mueller was almost killed in a car accident involving a grumpy man who seemed to go out of his way to back up and run over her. And I say accident, especially because from Astrid's perspective, well, it wasn't a truck, that's for sure. After the locals beat the homicidal driver to death for this, Astrid wakes up in the hospital to find, well, according to her, her father's face is made of snakes. Later in life, Astrid wrote gothic horror novels for years before writing a self-help book that put her on the map. 6 months ago, reporter Chloe Pierce tried to commit suicide after having lost her own fiancé to suicide and suffered a miscarriage. She's rescued by her neighbors, the Haverlin brothers. Innocent sweeties, really, and Chloe is pissed. If she's still going to be alive, she's going to try to find out what it was about Astrid's self-help book and her organization that she's built that drove him to do such a thing. When Chloe talks to a homeless friend of hers who was in the organization, he warns her to stay away, that he's been in the clean room, and that it's worse than hell, worse than emptiness. With no other choice, she travels to Astrid's headquarters in Chicago, meeting first with her surly ex-Mossad assistant, Miss Killian Reed.
See, and nothing sells me on a story more than a character with the word kill in their name.
She tries to push Chloe off as she keeps insisting on talking to Astrid, even knowing about what happens to reporters who try to say mean things about her boss, but Chloe won't budge, even as she sees a monster saying nasty things about Miss Reed behind her. After all, she has nothing left to lose at this point. Astrid herself finally enters and agrees to an interview. During it, when Chloe explains her reasoning behind this, she sees the monster again, and Astrid takes notice. She takes Chloe to the clean room, and after going through some sterilization procedures, she enters the entirely white room. Astrid talks to a man in the room who is having trouble sleeping. And inside the room, he talks about his greatest fears, of things that his mother put in his head, and the room itself seems to change. And we learn that this man is a child murderer, and after he confronts his fears, Astrid just lets him go. After all, she's not the police, she was looking for something else. And to that, Chloe swears to destroy this place for such a horrible attitude.
And as someone who greatly appreciates you, my children, yeah, I'm inclined to agree.
But it seems Astrid may know more than she lets on, as later that night, the man's fears come to life and, well, deal with him.
You're back on my good list, Astrid. Don't leave it again.
While Chloe is away, a man enters her home, seeing ghostly images of her dead fiancé, but fortunately is confronted by the Haverlin brothers, who naturally do not like anyone breaking into her home, like they just did. Whoops. Anyway, the man turns around and reveals his face, to the shock of the brothers.
Personally, I think he looks pretty handsome. Everyone else has weird standards of beauty.
After he attacks the three and walks away, Chloe is attacked by a gas station attendant who claims she tried to use a dead woman's credit card. Killian, however, shows up before he can try to do anything else to her. Chloe thinks this is all just part of the game. Anyone who is considered a threat to the organization and not affiliated with has their credit destroyed, ruin their reputations, etc. However, Killian thinks they should just find a motel together and screw each other's brains out. But then, a news report about a celebrity committing suicide gets her to leave, telling Chloe that Astrid thinks she has potential. but if she tries to hurt Astrid, she'll get a tire iron to the face. Speaking of, Astrid goes to the clean room to talk to another man who apparently experienced some kind of alien abduction of sorts. He claims that heaven is actually in the ground, that people are constantly stepping on the faces of angels. But during the recreation of his abduction, he is possessed by the man who tried to kill Astrid as a child. The death of the celebrity is being blamed on Astrid's organization, and people are turning away from it, since they had taken so much credit in helping him turn his life around. Killian thinks Chloe might be able to help them with the situation, offering her the full interview she wanted. But Chloe is not in the mood for it, especially not when she gets home and finds the Haverland brothers injured, but still happy and helping repair her house from the damage the intruder made. Meanwhile, the creature possessing the man in the clean room insists on being released, making threats and insults, but Astrid holds strong, wanting to know what its name is. It laughs, saying that the Library of Alexandria had a whole section in it about that, before it made them burn it all down. Astrid's assistant kills him when he starts advancing on her, much to her anger. Chloe, meanwhile, is confronted in her home by another creature, who says that its kind are rather mean, but it just likes to play, and it will do so by helping Chloe kill herself. While another associate of Killian named Capote deals with the celebrity fallout, Chloe speaks with the creature, who identifies itself as Spark. It explains how it was once exorcised out of a little girl's body, and then it proceeds to take possession of one of the Haverland brothers. However, even it seems scared when it realizes someone is approaching the house, a being called the Surgeon, who was responsible for killing Chloe's homeless friend. Back with Astrid, her assistant who shot the creature becomes possessed by it, but fortunately with Killian's help outside the clean room, they utilize the assistant's own memories to bring about his own fears and memories to screw with his mind, allowing them to defuse the situation. Spark wants Chloe to run, but she refuses, needing to know what it was that brought her fiancé to suicide. Spark replays the events that transpired, a message from Astrid about how, after she was almost murdered, she was able to see the world for what it truly was, and a parasite that was riding on her father. They are legion, and they are all around you. The full extent of everything that was explained to him drove him to suicide. The surgeon enters, claiming to be her doctor, and he seems to be trying to alter her memories of what transpired. But she sees right through it and puts some knives in his face. That do nothing to him. Spark returns and hands Chloe her phone, Astrid having been trying to call her since the creature mentioned that the surgeon was going after her. For 15 years, Astrid's people have been working on a weapon to shoot at the creature's invisible city, and she threatens the surgeon over the phone to leave Chloe alone or she'll fire it. She convinces him to leave, but Chloe wants to know what the hell they are. Aliens? Demons? Angels? Overlords? Oh, but its answer is simple. They're inmates. Astrid goes to see Chloe, explaining that she risked exposing her weapon because Chloe has certain powers that put her above even Killian in terms of value, and she needs to be protected. As Astrid said, every horrid nightmare and bleak concept of what is watching us from above is true.
Clean room is horrific in its imagery and terrifying in its concepts. And we shall enter it again sometime, my children. Hidely ho, my children! Let's see what the Simpsons decided to parody in their comics for the annual material that most people still watch regardless of anything else. The Treehouse of Horror.
Starting with It Happens. We cut back to Homer's childhood at a fair, along with his friends Barney, Lenny, Carl, and Marge.
What's that? That does not fit with the continuity? Well, whenever you notice something like that, a wizard did it.
They are branded as a pack of losers by their teachers. A club of losers, if you will, since they're off the clock and don't have to be nice to their students during this time. Barney decides to walk off and get himself a root beer float. But while walking home, he trips, and said root beer float falls into a sewer line, where a very helpful and pointy-teethed Krusty is waiting. Barney asks for his root beer float, but as Krusty points out, everything's afloat down there. Homer spots Krusty eating Barney and tells his friends about it, including Skinner, who decided to join in because there's an opening in the group. Marge draws the clown based on his description, and the art comes to life to try to eat them. Unfortunately, Homer is able to rip up the drawing. Soon, all the members of the group are haunted by their imaginative fears. Marge chased by a cigarette to get her to smoke like her sisters. Skinner by a giant version of his mom's foot that demands it be rubbed. Homer by what he'll look like in the future. And poor Lenny and Carl, a TV saying Alf is cancelled. Doing research, they learn that the Krusty Monster feeds on children and their greatest fears, which can be brought to life. Eventually, Homer comes up with an idea to fight off the clown, though not before it eats Skinner. Use their imaginations to summon up things to fight Krusty. Pink Smurfs, Mayor McCheese, and finally Knight Rider to run him over. 30 years later, Krusty returns for revenge on them, but he finds a less than receptive audience. Homer, Lenny, and Carl don't care if Krusty kills them because they work for Mr. Burns and it'd be doing them a favor. Marge's worst fear is not any worse than someone leaving a pack of gum in their pants while doing laundry. And when he tries to go after Bart and Lisa, they don't have any imagination to be afraid. TV and the internet get the job done for them. Krusty decides to just attack as many people as he can at a dedication ceremony for a new Lard Lad Donuts, appearing as a giant spider. But as Comic Book Guy points out, nobody's really scared of giant spiders after Wild Wild West. Unfortunately, Hans Moleman, operating a crane, drops the giant Lard Lad statue on the spider, killing it and ending the menace.
So this version of Pennywise would go, waha, waha, waha. Ugh.
Next up is A Fungus Among Us, wherein a meteor crashes into the Simpsons' living room. The fungus inside the meteor attaches itself to Homer, growing on his head in a way similar to Marge's hair. It spreads out more fungus to the children and other townspeople, not noticing that Marge is not one of them. Homer, as the King Fungus, explains to his fellows that their race of mushrooms were very much living things that ate plants and meat, but other life forms kept harvesting them for medicine, food, and poison. Now they plan to devour living beings on Earth as revenge. Marge calls Professor Frink for help, but suggests tea tree oil, but she lacks it, figuring olive oil might work because it comes from trees, but it just makes the fungus smell delicious. As such, she eats some and is soon infected. Still, she doesn't really mind. After all, things could be worse. She's surrounded by family, friends, beautiful things, and she'll never be hungry again. And finally we have Curse of the Cat Lady. Comic Book Guy, driving around on his Segway, accidentally runs over the tail of a cat belonging to a crazy cat lady. Angry, she puts a curse on him, pointing at Comic Book Guy and yelling, "Feline!" So the Comic Book Guy begins transforming into a cat, knocking over his own stuff on a countertop, growing fur, batting at things, and really he comes across as no different to anyone else, still surly, though more flexible. However, the curse finally really comes into effect when he tries to read a comic book, and can't because he lacks opposable thumbs to turn the page.
Oh no, my children! Can you think of anything more horrifying than to never be able to read comics again? This is why we still look to the Treehouse of Horror, because it may be comedy, but it knows what's truly frightening. Dead Cthulhu waits dreaming, my children! Haven't had a chance to learn the tale of Cthulhu, the original story by which all of the cute merchandise and hellish nightmares spawned from? Well, here's a comic adaptation of the Dark Tale.
The story is more a series of stories, part of a string of investigations into strange statues, crazy cults, and dreaming dead things from beyond the stars. Sculptor Henry Wilcox has dreamt of a slimy creature, miles high, on strange cities beneath the waves. From his dreams, he fashions a statue of one of these beings, even carving a bizarre, unknown language into it. He seeks help from Professor Angel, an expert in Semitic languages, to interpret the language he created. Intrigued by this, Professor Angel observes him during his dreams, or rather his nightmares about oozing green slime off of tentacles that wrap around him and squeeze.
It's funny, I know people who would definitely call that more of a fantasy than nightmare.
After Wilcox is struck by a strange fever and temporary madness, Angel tries to investigate this Cthulhu that he spoke of in his dreams. But after a year, he is murdered by an unknown figure. The murder is ruled an accident. The poor old man had a weak heart after all. And his nephew, Francis Thurston, meets with a friend of Angel's named Dr. Toby to discuss Angel's search for knowledge on Cthulhu. Among Angel's effects is another statue, very similar to the one Wilcox had made. According to the research, Wilcox's nightmares coincided with an epidemic of similar nightmares all across the world in March of 1925. Whether group mania or some kind of psychic communication, the nightmares of Cthulhu were felt all over. What followed were suicides, fiery rituals, mobs fighting each other in the streets of several cities, and an imperceptible language being spoken by the victims of the nightmares. Thurston meets with a policeman in New Orleans, Legrasse, who had met Angel during the investigation. Legrasse had been dealing with a strange cult that they were trying to break up. When questioned about who the cult's leader was, the members simply said, "He lives in Relaye, neither dead nor living."
So, me then? Do I have a cult? Cool!
The cultist would chant evil spells in the unknown language, killing themselves around an altar devoted to another statue of Cthulhu. Legrasse learns more of the cult's origins and what they worship. The Great Old Ones, who lived ages before men. The Old Ones are gone now, inside the earth and under the sea, but their dead bodies could still tell their secrets to men. And that Cthulhu, the great priest of the Old Ones, would someday rise again from under the water in the city of Relaye and bring the earth under his sway again. It would happen when the stars were ready, and the cult would be waiting to assist in the task. From there, Thurston speaks with the only remaining sane man among that cult, who indeed explains that when the stars have aligned again in the cycle of eternity, certain arts can revive them. Until then, they perform their rituals and yell their chant, "In this house at Relaye, dead Cthulhu waits dreaming." The cities of the Old Ones sank beneath the ocean, and the call of Cthulhu became harder for humanity to hear. Ocean water blocks telepathy.
So the cure for Old Ones-induced madness is to go to the beach?
As Thurston begins to fear that he will befall the same fate as his uncle, murdered because he learned too much, he also learns of a story related to another statue, this time of a yacht brought into New Zealand. There he reads the journal of Gustav Johansen, someone else who died mysteriously, a sea captain who had been aboard that yacht. His original ship had come across the yacht, called the Alert, who demanded that they turn around. The Alert was crewed by members of the Cthulhu cult, and Johansen saw it as his duty to destroy these people to protect others who might pass this way. Their original ship was damaged, so they commandeered the Alert, intent on finding out what it was the cult was trying to hide from them. There they discovered the ruins of some long-forgotten island. A corpse city, coated in green slime, all mingled mud, weeds, and ooze. It was like it had just risen from the bottom of the ocean. It had an abnormal shape. Simply walking around on it made the crew feel disoriented and drunk. And inside, they found massive doorways beyond anything they thought possible for its size. And out of it emerged Cthulhu, who killed some of them as they fled back to the yacht. With no seeming way to outrun the creature, Johansen rammed the Alert into it, thankfully destroying the creature. Except when he looked back, he saw the remains of it beginning to recombine into its original hateful form. Eventually, the alert was discovered, and those few who still survived were rescued. No sign of Cthulhu or the city was seen again, so it is presumed that they sunk beneath the ocean once more. It is a terrifying thought, though, for what has risen may sink, for what has sunk may rise. Oddly, the comic adaptation ends on a more hopeful note than the original tale, where Thurston simply thinks that he is not along for this world, a world that he can no longer enjoy because of his fear. But in the comic, Dr. Toby gives him some reassurance. It is the way of fear. We face them, they dissipate, then they come back again in the same old form. While there are enemies worth fearing in the invisible, perhaps we have friends in the invisible as well as enemies. And indeed, Thurston walks out and is almost killed by a falling rock, saved only by a cat screeching a warning at him. It is a changed ending that may disappoint some, since Lovecraft stories are usually without such hope. But even Thurston himself says that he has only survived this time.
But really what we should take away from this is that cats are our true allies against the Old Ones and Cthulhu. Eerie evening, my children. Shall we take another peek into the best in illustrated science horror? Shall we see what Cousin Eerie has dredged up for us? Of course we should! Here we go!
We start things off with shadow play. Mr. Durham goes to see a psychiatrist because of this psychological trouble he is having. You see, he feels very guilty about the little girl he killed in a hit and run. His psychiatrist, though, doesn't seem to mind when he explains this, even telling Durham that they can remove his guilt through a unique form of therapy he's developed. He tells Durham about the concept of the shadow, the Jungian idea of the cruel aspects of our personality that we wish to bury or forget. And if Durham wants to be freed of his cruelty and guilt, he should sit down in this little chair, be strapped down, and have those negative impulses, those toxic attitudes, sucked from his body.
I'm pretty sure this was a Rick and Morty episode.
And so those horrible negative impulses and ideas are drained and put into a tube, where it forms into a shadowy replica of Durham. His sins have been cast out. His soul is totally pure. And hey, how many people can say they died in such a state, eh? Yes, the psychiatrist frees the creature and lets it murder Durham and take on his identity. And hey, he's totally free of guilt about all the things he's done. The psychiatrist should know. He himself was the first test subject of the device. Next up we have Invulnerable. In the deepest part of Brazil, a rich man ventures forth in the jungle until he comes across a sorceress who can heal any injury. The man, Henry Moncrief, is desperate, having inherited a genetic disorder that will slowly kill him. The technology that might save his life is at least a decade out from completion, so his only hope now is magic. He pleads for her help, though of course she warns him that what he wants may not be for him. She provides him with a potion she can only make one of, and tells him to climb a mountain that night. When he reaches the top when the clouds clear in the night sky, he must drink all of it. Unfortunately, a bird soars near him and he spills some of it. He angrily berates the healer, who tells him that he was warned to drink all of it, though she admits he should get checked out by his doctors again, since a partial dose may have had a partial effect. Once he returns to New York, his doctors do say that he should see them, since something strange is happening to his bones, organs, and connective tissue. But on the way, he gets into a massive car crash and explosion. And he survives! Well, he survives as flesh and bone without any eyes. And finally we have the alien plague. A spaceship is sent out to a planet to investigate incidents of a strange alien plague. Previous expeditions to look into it were never heard from again.
So I guess they figured 7th time's the charm.
And a lone individual is sent down to the last known coordinates of people to try to find out what happened. He's transported to a city dump, where he finds, of all things, a comic book! one that's talking about the alien plague. The story in a story tells of a research team trying to find out more about the plague, how it transformed the bodies. But soon the transformations ended and they simply disintegrated. The team realizes that the other strange thing about the plague is that all paper has vanished. While one of the team is struck by a small piece of metal, other scientists speculate that the plague is actually a life form, an alien that's trying to be transported in human bodies, but they cannot sustain themselves in human form, instead devouring them from the inside, causing the disintegration. They realize that all of the outbreaks of plague started near city dumps, realizing that the aliens feed on, of all things, wood pulp, as well as the blood of humans, but mostly wood pulp. Soon the group has found the only place where there's still paper, a city dump, one full of comic books. And those comics are full of small pieces of metal, staples. And those staples launch out and attack the scientists, as it may well happen with the framing story of the investigator at the dump.
Oh, positively eerie, my children, especially when you consider that comic books don't kill people. Most of the time, anyway. If it bleeds, we can kill it, my children. It has been a long 4 years, but it is now time to finish the Fire and Stone saga with its last chapter, Predator.
When last we left off, Eldon, the android-turned-black goo mutant, had attacked the mutineer ship with his horde of xenomorphs, while at the same time, a group of predators attacked the ship to deal with the wayward creatures, with one even ending up mutated himself. In the end, Eldon survived his fight with the various parties, with a small group of xenomorphs still under his sway, and a small sample of his old pal Francis in a box.
I can relate, my children. I keep the bloody remains of people I know in a box, too.
Galgo, the lead mutineer, had escaped during this in the patrol ship Perseus, where we pick things up. Galgo has detected a stowaway on their ship. A predator. Before they can head home, they need to deal with it, though they don't want to risk using guns in the ship lest they blow a hole in it. Piper, one of his crew, engages the predator and actually manages to survive longer than one would expect, getting a few hits off with a cattle prod, and then getting his body blasted apart when he thinks he can bring his fists to a laser fight. Just to show what sort of a stand-up guy he is, Galgo decides to use his mentor, Higgins, as bait for the predator, flushing both out an airlock and failing as the predator easily survives and disarms Galgo of the engineer gun he had confiscated back when this whole thing started, revealing its real target, the engineers. The Predator is keeping Galgo alive because the Perseus is more advanced than normal human ships, and it doesn't know how to fly it. It takes some convincing, but eventually the Predator gets him to turn around and head back to LV-223. He even drags Galgo along by some kind of energy tether, probably to ensure he doesn't leave with the ship before he gets the skull of an engineer. While Galgo expects the place to be swarming with monsters, they instead discover piles and piles of dead xenomorphs. The two are able to kill some large beasts, and are found dead by Captain Angela Foster, whom he had left behind on the moon back in the Prometheus chapter. She and two others have survived this whole time, and while neither is happy to see one another, they recognize that they'll need everyone to survive. She explains that the engineers have been cleaning up the planet, killing the xenomorphs and other black goo monsters and studying them. Galgo and the Predator bond a bit over a campfire that night, sharing stories of their scars. With Galgo not really being able to understand the Predator language, but a hologram of one creature gives him the idea.
Aw, look at it! It's so cute!
They come up with a plan to use one of the black goo monsters, at least one of the tamer ones, as bait to lure out the engineers, with their first attempt failing, though Galgo's effort to save the Predator gets it to trust him, handing him back the engineer gun. And he'll need it, for they soon encounter an engineer and the fight begins. The Predator lets Galgo loose as he says he can only help him that way, but he then turns tail and runs like a coward. However, his son has a change of heart and goes back. The Predator uses every trick it has in its arsenal to try to fight the engineer. Her superior strength allows it to break its limbs and toss it around. Darts, javelins, cloaking. It's all the Predator can do to try to take down such a fearsome adversary. Unfortunately, their fight takes them back to the Perseus when the Predator elects to use its self-destruct to finally take down the engineer, too wounded to finish the job otherwise. While Galgo saves him and helps him escape the explosion, their escape ship is destroyed. Still, the Predator combed through the wreckage and got the trophy he wanted, even as Galgo admits to Angela what a complete ass he has been. A month later, Galgo is still with Angela's group as they continue their fight for survival, but the Predator has gone off. After all, he could hunt the humans, but after taking down an engineer, he's hunting bigger and better prey.
But I lied, my children. The Fire and Stone saga still has one more chapter to conclude things, and maybe even spell rescue for the doomed crew. But that's for next year. Throw your voice, my children! So, another Batman comic, yeah? What does he turn into this time? The mummy? The creature from the Black Lagoon? No. Despite the title, Batman isn't even part of this comic. It's about our old pal, the ventriloquist.
Last year, we talked about Shauna Belzer and her dummy, Ferdy, the murderous, terrifying duo who became the latest person to carry the ventriloquist name. She took on Batgirl, but how about a comic where she takes center stage without any in the cape and costume crowd, eh? This was during the second year of the New 52, when they tied into an event called Forever Evil by replacing all the main series books with villains for an extra issue, even adding a decimal point to the numbering.
Because there's nothing more villainous than decimal points!
Power is out in Gotham City, and yet a theater, the Melodeon, not only clearly has power still on, but it has a big welcome sign hung up, promising food for any who enter. Some people decide to enter, noticing a sign advertising the sultry seductress Shauna and her partner, the fantastic frisky Freddy. While Shauna prepares her makeup for the big show, she and Ferdy are conducting an interview with a journalist who's currently strung up by her own microphone.
And that, my children, is how you get someone to hang on your every word.
While the people who enter the theater introduce themselves to each other, Shauna relates her history to the journalist. She was born a twin, and as she relates, people just absolutely adored her and her brother. They certainly didn't only compliment him, either ignoring her completely or condescendingly say that she'd blossom into something beautiful eventually. To be kind, she let her brother get all the attention and spotlight while she got to stay in school and be called Shabby Shauna by her peers. Said peers also finding themselves mysteriously getting shoved into traffic by telekinetic hands.
Well, I say shoved. It's possible someone might have been deliberately trying to run them over because they could see monsters everywhere or something.
Still, she tells her brother that his success makes her happy, while she telekinetically moves him on the swings until he's pleading with her to stop. He doesn't want to be famous after all. But as she says, everyone wants to be famous. And the swings chains break and the poor boy hits the concrete and dies. Her brother's name? Ferdy!
Little weird then that she's dating a puppet with the same name. And she seems like such a normal gal.
A gang hears that something is going on at the Melodeon Theater and decides to investigate, while those inside the theater are told to sit down and watch the show. We get to the bit we saw last year, the party clown and the dummy he gave to Shauna. And of course, after her run-in with Batgirl, the police soon recognize their mistake in arresting her and, well, they let her out with a bang. While the show starts, to the horror of the audience.
Don't get why people don't like it. Her act's phenomenal.
The gang busts into the theater and tries to take the audience hostage. However, Ferdy and Shauna show how upset they are that they didn't wait for the second show. The rest of the gang know not to try to fight a killer ventriloquist dummy and run, not that they get far. The first man that Ferdy attacks complains about losing his eyes. But look at Ferdy! His eyes are glass and he's not complaining. Although he is complaining when one of the gang members finds Ferdy's secret stash. All his love letters to Batgirl. After he deals with them, he returns to Shauna and congratulates her on being so nice, protecting the innocent people and all. But Shauna informs him that she didn't want a real audience, just some people to perfect the act on. As such, she poisoned all the food that they ate when they came in. But hey, now they've really got a captive audience to watch the show.
And in the end, my children, isn't that what's important for this sort of thing? Good showbiz! Rise from your grave, my children! Let us continue on with Terry Moore's tale of people dying, getting buried in ditches, and then getting up from their shallow graves.
When we last left off, the teacher Rachel and her friends had been in a car accident that had wounded Aunt Johnny, who was actually a woman, so disregarded my last review calling them a he, and killed Jet. Fortunately, it seems Jet has the problem with dying that Rachel has, because she's soon rising up again in the morgue. A detective begins investigating not only this accident, but a lot of the strange occurrences in the town as of late, asking Rachel about the accident in Johnny's hospital room. The little girl who was with them in the car, Zoe, has vanished and no one saw her at the scene. Down in the morgue, a friend of Jet's named Earl admits to her corpse that he always loved her and is so sorry that her beauty has ended. But then Jet wakes up. Admittedly, because of her broken neck, she can't really do anything right now, but hey, it's a step up from being dead.
I mean, from their perspective anyway, as someone who is undead, being alive is pretty overrated in my opinion.
Zoe is heading back to her old house, though along the way she passes a cemetery, where all the corpses explode out of the ground, their bodies forming into a pentagram. Seeking help, Rachel speaks with Dr. Simon, the man with his own dead bride that he hopes to resurrect now that he knows that the dead walk. With his help, they stitch up Jet's wounds and correct her neck so that she can actually move around again. While Jet thinks that she's just a zombie now, but hungers for peanut butter, not so much brains or flesh, Dr. Simon is convinced that the two are angels of some variety. Speaking of angels and devils though, the mysterious woman who seemed to start these events meets up with Zoe, and we start getting a bit of an explanation for things. For starters, Zoe is not a little girl. She's been alive for 47 years. Been a 10-year-old girl that long since her parents died.
Not sure if that explains her sister, but whatever, maybe that's in volume 3.
The woman is named Lilith, and she knows that Zoe is actually possessed by the original evil, the devil himself, aka Malice, whom she had made a deal with 300 years ago. She wants this town, Manson, destroyed, and all the people in it dead, but is impatient with the progress. Malice has schemes and plans of his own, but so does Zoe, who wants no part in any of this, and thus stabs herself with a knife to try to end all this. Lilith, however, knows that this will just enable Malice to escape her body if she dies, so she rushes her to the hospital. We also check in once again on the other resurrected woman with a snake in her belly, which she once again uses to kill a colleague of hers who had come to check on her. At the hospital, Jet and Rachel spot the unconscious body of Zoe, who has just been saved by the doctors, though she was dead briefly during their work. When Rachel tries to touch her, her hand seems to burn and she leaves, suddenly knowing where to find Lilith. Jet, however, is revealed to be possessed by Malice now. Rachel finds Lilith at the ditch where so many have died and been resurrected lately, and she finally explains what's going on. Lilith is the same as the original mythological one, the first woman. 300 years ago, the town of Manson decided to do some witch burning. Or was it witch drowning? After so long, some of the details get confused. In any case, 100 women who were childless and above the age of 15 were murdered by the town on the assumption of witchcraft, Lilith included. Both Snake Woman and Rachel herself were among their number, along with a bandaged woman who was hanging out with a wolf. The four were indeed witches, but they had been using their magic to help the town. So naturally, their ignorance and stupidity got so many innocents murdered. Lilith herself was immune to the damage they tried to inflict on her, and when they discovered the terrible depth of their mistake, they tossed Lilith into a well to try to bury their own sins.
And yet not once has she made a phone call letting people know they would die in 7 days. That's probably because they just get up again.
Lilith wants this place exterminated, even resurrected her 3 former compatriots for this task. Though Rachel says she does not remember any of this, and even if true, these people are innocent of the crimes from 300 years ago. As such, Lilith transports Rachel down into the mass grave of the ditch so she won't interfere. Malice, in the meantime, talks to Zoe and tells her that he intends for her to carry his child in her adulthood, to protect the Antichrist until the time is right. But of course Zoe is not on board with such a plan, and says he can just kill her now. Still, he puts her to sleep and tries to convince her with his powers that that was just a dream. In the meantime, after murdering Zoe's social worker from the previous volume, Malice decides to hop into a new body, electrocuting herself while jumping into the body of a priest. And poor Earl must find Jet's body once more, and holds her hand, since earlier she had told him that it was the only thing she had been able to feel. Oh, and Rachel digs herself out of the mass grave.
Not surprising, really. It's like riding a bicycle at this point. You dig yourself out of one grave, and you can dig yourself out of any. Monstrous Monday, my children! Time for our last check-in with Marvel's horror characters, as we see what's happened to the monster of Frankenstein.
When we last left him, the monster had finished regaling Walton and Knut with the tale of what he had been up to for 100 years following the death of Victor Frankenstein, and an ice storm had claimed the lives of Walton's companions. Before he died, Walton had told the monster that Frankenstein has a descendant who knew of the monster's existence, and thus might be able to help him in some way. And so the monster has set sail on a makeshift raft to find his descendant, where we pick things up in this issue. And of course, a story based on Mary Shelley's classic story opens with a quote from Creedence Clearwater Revival's Bad Moon Rising.
Frankenstein's monster is a werewolf?
Along his way, he comes across a small burning boat, a woman strapped to the front of it. He rescues the woman and brings her to a nearby shoreline, and finds himself attracted to her. Realizing she needs more help than he can provide, he makes his way to a nearby fishing village, only to observe the people in said village in the midst of celebrating that the woman's ship has sunk and that she is dead now. Knowing that no aid will come from these people, he takes her to a nearby barn, intent on stealing a horse and hoping he can take her someplace else. The woman awakens and is momentarily startled by his appearance, but soon explains that these people are possessed by a demon in black robes. It was only her that could resist the evil spell, and thus they were ordered to kill her. She explains that, coincidence of all coincidences, they are inside the barn of her family home, her father once being a great warrior in the country, using a special silver sword that is now buried in a tree trunk by the demon, so it can't be used against them. The monster thinks her father can help slay the demon, but she says his will is under the demon's control as well, before she passes out once more. With no other options, he takes the woman's sleeping body to her father, who angrily professes that he must indeed slay her and the devil spawn that has brought her back. He insists that she must die, but collapses after the monster is able to best him in combat, dead. The monster wonders if he has killed again, though the man was quite old. After he slips away to try to find medicine, he returns to find another man over the two left in the cabin. The man tries to explain to the monster what is happening, but he is in no mood for explanations and tosses the man through a window. He takes her into a forest and cares for her, healing her injuries and providing her with food and supplies. The woman, Lenore, comes to appreciate his kindness and goodwill, saying that she could someday fall in love with him. However, after finding her some shelter, he awakes to find her gone. Wondering if the villagers somehow were able to creep up while he slept and not make a single sound before taking her away again. He finds Lenore's tattered dress, a slain wolf carcass, and footprints leading back to the village, and soon finds a werewolf attacking the city's guard.
By the Longbox! Jacob Russell! Where's my Marvel Cinematic Universe uniting all their horror characters?
Believing that the werewolf is responsible for the loss of Lenore, the monster engages it in battle. The villagers watch, thinking that if the creatures do not destroy each other, they will have to kill the winner. The battle brings them to the tree where Lenore's father's sword was kept, and the monster takes it, finally slaying the werewolf. Transforms back into Lenore, much to his confusion. It seems like the crowd is ready to fight the monster, but they are calmed by a man in black who approaches, who tells the monster that Lenore was the one possessed by a demon. A wolf demon at that. And indeed, the man in black robes that she had feared was a priest. He advises the monster to leave, lest the crowd think him a demon, and he departs back on his journey.
The story of Frankenstein is one of tragedy, my children. Not just for the doctor, but for the monster whose tragedy continues on into its life. When you wish upon a star, my children! Oh great, so Disney's so obsessed with obtaining every single franchise on the planet, now they've got Dracula? Actually, Mickey Mouse starring as Dracula would be pretty apt.
But let's see what they do with our classic tale of the great vampire. Mickey plays not the bloodsucker himself, but rather Jonathan Ratker. He travels to the land of Beatsylvania and the Carpathian Mountains.
So we get pun names for Harker and Transylvania, but not Carpathian Mountains? I mean, I'd improve it by calling it Corpsathian myself, but...
And thus Mickey is brought to Castle Dracula to aid the Count in his purchase of land at Carfax Abbey. Mickey is curious why the Count wants to move to England, and Dracula just thinks the climate is better. The fog is chillier, the people, well, they're a lot more hot-blooded. Dracula is most especially interested in the locket Mickey carries that shows a picture of Minnie, Menina.
Yeah, as you can tell, I'm just gonna call most of them by who they are. Easier for me, and frankly, it helps make this a little more unique than all the other times I've recounted Dracula for you.
The Count doesn't like mirrors, which is a bit of a problem since he's so vain about his hair and the wigs he wears. I think that's a job at Coppola's Dracula. Whatever. Point is, he forces Mickey to stay at the castle and write letters to Minnie, telling her to forget him. Dear Minnie is staying with her friend Clara Lucia Westerna, some cow lady.
Yeah, I'm sure this might come as a big surprise to you, my children, but I don't really watch a lot of traditional Disney stuff.
Clara, of course, has her 3 suitors, but let's not dwell on them, but the horror of Mickey as he remains trapped in Dracula's castle. He continues to write in his journal of Dracula's plans to go to England with his boxes of earth on the terrible creatures that inhabit the castle that prevent his escape. And oh, what do they feed on? Well, I'm sure we'll find out later. In the meantime, how strange it is that the ship carrying Dracula's boxes seems to have lost all its crew, save for a dog or a wolf that escapes into the mainland. Later, Clara's suitors talk of how strange it is that she has developed a craving for beets, and she's ravenous for the stuff. And strangely, Minnie seems to see her embracing a figure at night, one that transforms into a wolf, an ostrich, and finally a bat.
I'd make a joke about an ostrich being its most powerful form, but honestly, wild ostriches fight with lions. Don't screw with them.
With her beat obsession stronger than ever, there is only one they can call upon for help. Goofy Van Helsing. While he arrives and hits a sign while waving out the window of his train, Minnie departs, having received a letter from Jonathan seeking her aid. Goofy interviews Clara as he gives her some garlic flowers, and during this he notices the fangs that have formed in her teeth. Goofy also meets with Dracula's insane servant, Pete Pegfield, and his peculiar habit of collecting files.
No, you could have just cut the character. You didn't need to make him just some weird guy who collects files like they were trading cards.
Minnie, meanwhile, sees Jonathan as he recovers from his ordeal at the castle. Minnie has read his journals and learned of the horrible things he was subjected to. Dracula's brides having fed him a lot of baked goods. Mickey learns that Clara has been having that craving for beets, the same that Dracula's brides did.
The implication with all of this that people have beet juice for blood?
Unfortunately, when Minnie returns to Clara, she discards the closed windows and garlic flowers that were helping improve her condition, allowing Dracula to come and finish his task of murdering her, or rather, transforming her into a huge beet. So they plant her in the greenhouse and wait for roots.
Somehow this actually seems more horrifying than the original story.
Indeed, Goofy explains that Nosferatu, like Dracula, live underground as living beets, feeding on life force and turning other creatures into vegetables.
I'm gonna pretend this is the truth behind VeggieTales.
After realizing that Dracula is after Minnie, they begin the hunt for all the places Dracula has purchased residence, readying garlic to be buried in that earth. Minnie is brought to the local asylum for protection, but Dracula meets up with his servant within its walls and his collection of files, which he uses to burst through the various locks in his way to get to Minnie. She is infected, but with her psychic connection to Dracula as a result of that feeding, she knows that he moves to return to his home country on its native soil, since all of his boxes of earth are contaminated with garlic. As Minnie and Goofy split off from the rest, since the psychic connection works both ways, they encounter a cave that is just the rest they need on the way to Castle Dracula. It actually has a restaurant in it! Run by Dracula's wives! Minnie, realizing who they are, decides to deal with them while the rest reach Castle Dracula along with their undead enemy. He fights Mickey, rapidly transforming into a variety of forms until finally a ray of sunlight hits the Count, freezing him forever in between forms and ending his reign of terror. Well, for the most part, since now a half-ostrich, half-bat creature is now being hunted in the woods near Beatsylvania. Also, Clara apparently recovered from death by wearing earrings made of garlic, and no one but Goofy could stand the smell, so they hooked up.
Well, to be honest with you, my children, this one's kinda weird. But hey, when you get right down to it, all vampire lore is a little weird and silly. And regardless of anything else, Dracula still strikes terror even in the heart of Mickey Mouse. Every town has an Elm Street, my children! But unfortunately, we won't be visiting them anytime soon, for this is the final issue of Wildstorm's Nightmare on Elm Street comics.
Dean here is a fast food worker employed by Burger Heaven and is of course trying his hardest to get through his shift at his stressful, miserable job. When good old Mr. Kruger shows up to remind him that he really needs to take a closer look at those burgers to make sure they're actually cooking. And what do you know? His cheek the next morning indicates that indeed they were. He thinks the stress of the job is getting to him, working double shifts, opening and closing, making burgers in his sleep, getting hurt and not remembering how. It all just piles on. His co-workers aren't really that helpful, especially not his boss, who keeps asking him to work so many long shifts. One night, he dreams of going back into the meat freezer and finding a naked woman cut and tied up back there. He tries to tell his manager, Mr. Kruger, about it, but he just says that's some personal business and get back to work making a few thousand orders. Don't forget, no pickles on 300 of the cheeseburgers. And of course, the next morning, he overhears his co-workers talking about the strange news story of a girl who was found that morning, frozen solid like ice. When he drifts back to sleep at work, he sees Kruger killing more, causing him to wake up startled and attract the attention of his boss. Said boss seems to think his name is Dan, and that he's a real mess. And that's so disappointing. He thought he was management material. He sees the woman that Kruger was going to kill in the place, drinking some coffee, but in his exhausted state, he can't really convince her to stay and help, only resulting in burning some burgers and almost starting a fire. When he's sent home, he dreams of being back in the burger joint, now with Kruger telling him to ready some chicken for a birthday party coming in. Although, as he notes, at least Kruger knows his name.
And yet he hasn't murdered him yet either. Did Freddy Krueger just find his true calling as a fast food manager?
His naps at work get worse as he spots co-workers being slaughtered by Freddy, visions of angels and demons to match the burger heaven aesthetic not helping the matter. When he grabs a knife, his co-workers think he's gone insane, and they run out, thinking he's threatening them. The police are called, and they try to get him to come out, but he just falls asleep again, Freddy now appearing as a customer to order some dozen buckets of chicken. White meat, extra crunchy. And soon the cops storm the place, only to find a dozen buckets of chicken filled with Dean's body parts and guts.
In Freddy's defense, Dean was secretly stealing from the register. And while it may be the last time we check in on Freddy in a while, at least he left us wanting more. Giant greetings, my children! Occasionally, we show off giant monster fights because kaijus and the like are tangentially related to horror. But how about we have a genuine kaiju horror story,
Don Maggart is an astronaut at the International Space Station, about to perform the very first solo flight in space. It is a dream come true and history being made. And his thoughts are not on it at all. He just wants this mission over with so he can go home and try to work things out with his wife, Monica, who has admitted to cheating on him with a NASA engineer. He hopes it's not too late to salvage his relationship. And hey, at least when he returns to Earth, they'll have a pizza waiting for him on the runway. He's starving! And so is the strange parasitic creature that soon breaches his hull and envelops him. For NASA, the screen is static, with the only sound being Don's perpetual screeches of pain and horror. They do finally get the camera back online. For a moment anyway, which just shows the parasite devouring him down to the bone while he screams for help. And then his ship explodes.
That's probably not going to help fix his marriage. Oh, wait! Ghost marriage!
As the debris crashes into the Pacific Ocean, the parasites invade his mind, slithering into every nook and crevice of his body as they merge with him. He remains conscious during the entire painful process, random recent thoughts invading his mind. His cheating wife, or the people who didn't understand him, mission failed, needing a drink of alcohol, being intensely hungry. And ooh, that last one's something that the parasites can relate to. In the water, the now merged parasite form of Don attacks some sharks in the area, tearing their flesh apart while trying to devour them. With each body he consumes, his biomass expands, growing larger and larger. And more food is supplied when a rescue team arrives to try to recover the remains, and is in turn consumed by the monster Don. Bullets do nothing to stop the giant monster. Don merely tosses the helicopters shooting at him around like they were toys. General Gorgos of the US military takes charge of the situation, learning from NASA that, based on the footage and monitoring equipment that Don had on him, that the creature apparently is Don. He travels to the island that the monster is approaching, two local children also spotting its arrival. The two boys end up running into the general as the army arrives, taking them with him after hearing that their parents have likely been killed at the dock that the monster is attacking. The monster marches through the island, destroying buildings and eating people as it goes, displaying enough limited intelligence to speak in broken words. Monica is summoned to the island as well, hoping that the presence of Don's wife will calm him. Meanwhile, General Gorgos apparently decided to take the two children back to the mainland, on straight to Area 51. Why? He just feels responsible for their well-being. He brings them to see Dr. Fenstermacher, a former Nazi scientist who was retrieved from the Third Reich when he was only 19. He's been working for the US government since then, specifically in robotics. In the meantime, Don has made it to the mainland himself and begins wrecking Los Angeles. Though it takes a moment to look at himself in the reflection of some windows, some brief humanity shining through, before he smashes it in anger. As for the former Nazi, he has been building a giant robot.
Why? Why the hell not?
Admittedly, the swastikas on it are a bit of a bad design element, commented on by the kids at that. But hey, giant robot versus giant monster. While that travels, how does Monica's efforts to reach Don go? Well, it seems to be working at first. Until he spots her NASA engineer lover also there, which subsequently gets him to kill the two of them. The robot attacks Dawn, proclaiming that its prime directive is to protect. Dawn actually tries to surrender to it, but the robot just attacks and a glorious battle ensues. Eventually, the robot seems victorious. However, its other prime directive initiates. Conquer the world! Yes, it seems Fenstermacher has been playing the long game to eventually use the giant robot to take over the Earth.
Man, if you can't trust the Nazis these days, well, you could never trust them ever because they're Nazis.
The kids knock out Fenstermacher and smash the robot's controls, which causes the robot to malfunction enough for Don to return to the fight and destroy it, collapsing afterwards himself. Gorgos even gives him a salute for his actions.
Giant Monster combines the best elements of horror and kaiju movies, my children. Horrific imagery, body horror, mass destruction, and giant robots fighting giant monsters. Nothing better encapsulates the season. Die short und fester, my children! We don't see enough Star Trek stories around here, sadly. Too worried about scientific explanations for ghosts and goblins to let them spook and startle. How fortunate, then, that they still pay respect to the mummy.
Oh, the cover on this one says it all, my children. Death grazes the Enterprise crew when 10,000-year-old mummies come to life. Watch them advance on and kill a red shirt. Behold Mr. Spock's phaser doing nothing to it.
The mummies are so scary they turn Spock's shirt red.
The Enterprise is sent to Haitius 7 to pick up and transport an ancient alien mummy to a research institute, bringing with them Dr. Moria Starr, the Federation's foremost interstellar archaeological expert. While she starts studying the mummy in its electronic sarcophagus, Spock, McCoy, and a resident archaeologist, Dr. Moore, explore the ruins of Haitius 7. The mummy is transported aboard the Enterprise, where it soon awakens and exits its tomb, quickly attacking the security detail guarding it. However, instead of going on a rampage, it simply goes into the central computer core and makes some adjustments to the ship before returning to its coffin. On the planet, the dig team discovers an ancient laboratory with 3 more mummies in sarcophagi, along with a chamber containing the decayed bones of either prisoners or guinea pigs.
Why not both?
The old lab equipment is accidentally switched on and the mummies come to life, advancing on our heroes.
Well, your heroes anyway. I'm rooting for the mummies.
They fire their phasers upon the mummy, but like on the cover, their weapons are useless. The mummies knock them out, while on the Enterprise, they learn that they have somehow left orbit, on course for an uncharted solar system inside of Romulan space. But oh no! The Romulans are supporters of the Klingons, according to Kirk.
Because nobody gives a crap about the Romulans themselves, I guess.
As they try to bypass the computer systems, the mummy awakens again and strangles the security guards, heading to engineering to continue its control of the ship. Once more, weapons are useless. They say it's because of a force field, but I think we all know it's just another example of the power of the mummy. And hey, it even has its own circuitry to link into the Enterprise.
Cyborg mummies!
And indeed, that fact is soon confirmed back on Haitius 7. Spock and McCoy awakening and scan the mummies as it begins operating on one of their party. Of course, the organic parts of their bodies are long dead after 10,000 years, leaving only the robotic parts to keep them moving. Spock is able to access their directives and goals. They intend to convert all humans into more cyborgs like them.
Me personally, I am all in favor of making the Borg into mummies.
Dr. Starr, having studied transcripts of the text found at the excavation site, has discovered the truth behind the mummies and what happened on Haitius 7. Their world had become overrun by unchecked technology and overpopulation, their resources drained and dying. Their last stronghold outlawed advanced technology like spaceflight in the hopes of curbing their demise. But soon their great king was dying, and the science ministry elected to turn him into a cyborg to ensure there wasn't panic in the face of his death. Unfortunately, that did not quite work out. The cyborg king became the puppet of the head of the science ministry, forcing all people to become cyborgs so that they could survive, even telling them they must go out into the stars if they were to live again.
So this is less the Borg and more the Cybermen from Doctor Who. Nah, I'm still okay with this as long as they're mummies.
Unlike the Cybermen, though, the people revolted, sealing up their leaders, and the only 4 converted into cyborg mummies, in the lab. Eventually, the people died out, and the mummy they have on board the ship is the old king, still following the old programming to try to take his people to the stars. Back on Haitius, the landing party fires their weapons at full blast, continually shooting the mummies, and eventually their own internal power reserves finally die. Unfortunately, the king mummy on board the Enterprise has tapped into the ship's engines and cannot be dealt with like that. What's worse, the Romulans have detected them and moved to intercept. And just on top of that, Dr. Starr refuses to let Captain Kirk harm the mummy. It's too valuable to science, after all. Fortunately, Kirk being Kirk, is able to keep her at bay while they enact their plan, short-circuiting the mummy and turning the Enterprise away. The mummies are delivered to the lab for study, and Dr. Starr even apologizes for losing her head.
Which makes it okay that she almost got them killed. Still, I am happy that she wasn't punished. After all, she was the only one who tried to defend the mummies, the real heroes of the story. Happy Halloween, my children! Last year, for the end of the season, we looked at a story where Sherlock Holmes had to defeat an army of zombies led by Professor Moriarty. Now let's see how he contends with the Lord of Vampires.
It has been a short time since the zombie invasion, and London is rebuilding. In the wake of all the space that has been made clearing away buildings, old artistic and architectural projects are being revived, including John Flaxman's 200-foot Britannia statue. In the meantime, Holmes and Watson are summoned to Lloyd's of London to consult with the largest maritime insurers of the world. It seems that an incident has occurred with a ship they covered, the Demeter. The ship was carrying a cargo of many wooden boxes filled with scientific earth, and the crew are all missing. Save for the captain, who is dead, tied to the wheel and carrying a crucifix. The ship miraculously reached port, where a dog was seen fleeing it.
I'm thinking it was Frankenstein.
They want Holmes to investigate what happened for the sake of the dead crew, especially since the log entries also mentioned some strange spectral figure that was immune to their knives. The boxes of earth were claimed by a solicitor in Whitby, where Holmes and Watson go next, finding the family of the solicitor dead from what appears to be the Black Plague. And yet everyone seemingly fell over unexpectedly. They are attacked by a mysterious band of brigands who set the place on fire, while in the meantime, the Queen herself is seeking assistance with the blood disorder that affects the royal line. From Count Dracul of Transylvania.
Oh, I see now. The Wolfman was responsible.
Holmes and Watson are rescued by a group of Romani who explain about Dracula and his servants, who killed the solicitor to cover their tracks, and it seems Holmes is already familiar with the concept of the vampire. Dracula, for his sake, plots to take over England with a unique strain of the bubonic plague. Savage, but short-lived, so that it burns out after a brief time. He used it during one of his campaigns before his transformation into the vampire. He is slowly creating an army of thralls using his own blood, curing those stricken with the plague with his vampiric taint, so that they are ghouls under his command. He plans to do the same to the Queen. Holmes and Watson trace Dracula's boxes of earth to Carfax Abbey, where they come across Professor Van Helsing and his party from the novel about to wreck the boxes. Suspecting that the soil has been contaminated with the plague, Holmes stops them and they compare notes. Still, Dracula's home soil must be dealt with. Fortunately, Holmes has a better solution than simply dumping them. Blowing them up!
Sherlock Holmes is much more of an arsonist than I was led to believe by the original stories.
After engaging with Lucy and Dracula's thralls, Jonathan Harker relates his tale to Holmes, though things sadly went differently in a few places. For starters, Arthur Holmwood, in grief over Lucy, spirited her body away before they could kill her and joined forces with Dracula. In addition, there was poor Mina. When she was infected with Dracula's bite, she elected to take her own life, willingly disintegrating in sunlight so as not to become like Lucy or Dracula's brides. While the stories of supernatural things may seem outlandish to some, Holmes cannot deny the evidence of his eyes. What is impossible today may be commonplace the next. Still, he is curious how a Transylvanian count knew of a provincial solicitor like the one Jonathan belonged to, or what Arthur's role is in all this. It is then that Mycroft Holmes enters the picture, informing them that Arthur was working for him. Yes, it seems that after the battle with Moriarty and his zombies, sections of the government decided that England needed new weapons for dealing with the supernatural. People were employed to find anything that might be useful, from legends, folk tales, myths, and Arthur found Dracula. However, he elected to join forces with him to try to take over England. But as the readers discover, Arthur has grown frustrated with Dracula's more brutish tactics and impatient attempts at army building, loudly berating the Count for his actions. And the Count decides to let Lucy feast on him. Holmes, Van Helsing, and company deduce Dracula's hideout and enter it secretly, discovering Arthur's body in Severn Castle. They encounter Dracula's brides, who are able to kill Dr. Seward before being extinguished by the group. Holmes in particular armed with a flare gun that shoots shells of oak splinters, silver nitrate, and several cloves of garlic. Lucy, however, elects to kill Dracula's brides and warns them not to pursue her, that she prefers the freedom that vampirism grants her from high society. But she does not want the same fate as Dracula's brides, mere obedient concubines. They manage to trace Dracula's servants back to a builder's company and realize that they have been one of the groups conscripted to rebuild Buckingham Palace after the zombie attack. As such, they must have smuggled Dracula into the palace already. At the palace, there is already a costume ball in place for the engagement of the Queen's grandson, Prince Albert Victor, and Princess Mary of Teck. While according to Van Helsing, holy water's effects on vampires is a myth, sanctified Eucharists hold a greater power, administering them to every bottle of champagne in the place. They find Dracula as he cannot drink the liquid, but he manages to take the Queen hostage. He tells Holmes that he plans to turn this island nation into a kingdom of blood, and he as its Red Monarch. As such, to foment chaos, he bites the Queen's neck and flees. Holmes and Quincy manage to grab hold of the half-transformed into a bat Dracula, stabbing at his body until they crash. Quincy is killed, but gives Holmes his silver-lined knife. However, Holmes, being the sort he is, he elects to destroy Dracula with some wooden debris that impales the Count, using the knife to cut off his head. Fortunately, the Queen is safe. The one who was bitten and killed was, in reality, an actress hired to stand in for her after several murder attempts over the years. Still, Holmes is not pleased with these developments. The vindication for a supernatural task force and the dark power that it wishes to play with has been affirmed. It is a new world of gods and monsters, and Holmes can only hope there is a place in it for mankind.
Oh, my children, there will always be a place for you in it. It's just that in October, the worlds meet more than normal, and I am more than happy to take my time each year to open the Longbox and bring you tales of these worlds meeting. Until next time.